All right. Welcome aboard, everybody. It's one of the rare Saturday night streams. My wife and my daughter are out at a friend's house, and I just didn't feel like going out. Didn't feel like it today. And I thought, well, I could stay home. I could putt around doing some stuff. And so I threw the poll up. The poll answer that was winning, at least winning at the time that I last checked to go live, was to do game prep stuff. I think the choices were do some work stuff, gaming related, but work stuff, prep, and then playing Disco Elysium. And it was really close. Disco Elysium was right there. But last I checked, and it's kind of too late now, but I'll just check to see if anything happened. Prep had snuck ahead. Oh, well, Disco Elysium's tied it up. Probably too late for that now. I could probably download it in the background. Charred castle or charred cattle and a salad. All right. Well, I was going to say what a charred castles, but charred cattle sounds good. Charred cattle, one of my favorite foods to make and to eat. Wish it weren't, just for all things considered, but it is. So enjoy, Frederick. Enjoy the meats and greens. I got a good recipe. There's a really good recipe for steak that I've been leaning on for years now. Found it in Cooks Illustrated, or maybe I watched it on Cooks Illustrated show ages ago. Or I might have, we used to get their magazines on subscription. Might have been from there. Anyway, works really well. But there's nothing like a restaurant cooked steak. Frederick, I don't mind A1, but I feel like a really good steak does not require A1. A really good steak, to me, stands on its own. Doesn't need any sauce. I mean, look, I love sauces. A1's not my favorite. I love béarnaise, nice béarnaise sauce, maybe a nice butter, a little garlic butter, herb butter on there. But I think a really good steak, to me, needs no sauces. No sauces, just some salt, some pepper. I'll use a little bit of butter. Well, I do a kind of an oven method. So when it's in the oven and then I bring it to the stove to finish, which is where I get the char on, I'll put some butter in there. I do like a little bit of buttery sort of thing there, but it needs no sauces, though. I do love a good sauce. A1's pretty good, but if I'm in a restaurant, it's hard for me to not take the béarnaise if the béarnaise is available. But I think if it's a really good steak, I'm like, I shouldn't eat it. Shouldn't eat it. I'm almost wary of a place that really throws their sauces at you, because I'm thinking if you need the sauce, then maybe you need to work on the steak. But we all got to deal with what we got to deal with. In New York, where I am, fortunately, has no shortage of steak places. So I feel like that's kind of probably true of most, right? I mean, if you're in the U.S., is there a city out there that doesn't have good steaks, even a town? I think the steaks are so, I think, of just central to the American experience. 16.13. I guess I should talk about at some point what's going on with the home game. I had it wasn't a TPK precisely, but we decided to do a bit of a reset, which meant it reset in this way was they ended the story of their previous characters, and they decided to try anew. Arkansas has bad steaks. I don't know. I feel like you ask, are you in Arkansas, Frederick? Is that where you live? Because I kind of feel like the natives of any state that were accused of having poor steaks would probably be fighting words. But if you're a native of there, I'll take your word for it. I'm not a huge pork fan. It's something that's grown on me kind of as an adult. Chicken's fine. I like chicken. But usually if I had to pick, I'd go with beef if I had a choice. Back to the game. The game, we did call it a soft, I want to say, it was not a soft reboot. A reboot, a refresh, a restart, if you will. So their characters, they decided those guys' stories were over. And this is a dim sum kind of tea for the working man, a mix. This is a mix of pu'er, which is fermented tea, and chrysanthemum, and a bit of mint. which I've been trying lately when I've been enjoying. And I brewed up a pot to bring with me. So in the game, the party decided to do this kind of reset. Or the players decided to reset things. Their characters were not dead, though they weren't doing very well. And it was I think they were feeling the burden of what had happened to them. And I will say that might be I'm not going to say a weakness of the way I tend to run the game, but at least there is an issue of you can get things kind of piled on. You can get somewhat conditions, if you will, sort of piled on you. And if you're not really prepared to kind of make headway against it, you can kind of feel, and I think they certainly they felt like at a little point, like, man, it's really uphill sledding. And we're every time we think we've gotten rid of one thing, we seem to have gotten another thing on. And I had floated this to them before. I said, listen, we hadn't played together before. This is new for you guys. You guys are new for me. And so we're kind of getting our styles meshed together. And so you guys made decisions and things, maybe not understanding everything, at least earlier decisions. Later decisions, I think maybe they just did and then regretted it. But in any case, it was like, well, maybe you guys made some choices, but hey, look, start over. These guys go off into the sunset. And you guys will start sometime somewhere else in the same world. We're not starting over a new world, but presumably. And I had left it when we kind of went over this. I had sort of said, I'm not sure where I'm going to put you and the wheres and whens of it going to be. So don't worry about that. But it'll be somewhere else. So we eventually decided, okay, that's what we're going to do. And we've played kind of 2 sessions. One of which I kind of hard to call it a session. We hadn't played for a while. Our games have been kind of spotty lately. And it was so spotty that one of the guys was like, canceled our one game and was like, hey, well, he said, like, I can't play on this night because I'm going to be driving the car, but can we play while I drive? And I was pretty dubious on the playing while driving aspect. But I said, you know what? You really want to play. Look, I guess I should be flattered that someone's like, listen, I got to drive the car, but I still want to do this. And I said, all right, we'll do something. I wasn't going to do anything, any kind of hardcore, put them in any spots. Cause I'm like, you're driving at night. We're playing. It's already, I feel like that's already asking for an accident to happen. The last thing I want to do is then put it in a situation in which you're really going to have to put a lot of thought into it. But I thought they can kind of get their toes wet, sort of dabble in the setting. And then once we had that session, which they didn't really do much, they just kind of got started in the town I stuck them in and we're sort of feeling out what to do. Then it was Thursday, actually, was our first kind of real session. A couple things I did, I kind of regret a little bit one of the things I did, but I always feel like and this is interesting because it came up on Reddit recently. Somebody asked about these sort of in media res. Hey, no, Sorian, how are you? The in media res, the hot start, as some people will call it. In media res means basically kind of beginning in the middle, and that's a trick you'll see a lot in movies, and people use it in games too, where if you've ever been in a campaign and you sit down and the GM says, all right, you're on the run from bandits, or the town's on fire, or, you're trapped in a burning barn and there's a group of orcs on the outside, that kind of thing, where you're just starting sort of in the midst of the action. It's a powerful technique for really just getting people going, because you're put in a situation where you don't really have to think. There's not too much to think about. You're sort of prompted, and it gives you this kind of push through. Right. And it's good. I like it. I think sometimes it can be too much, and I think it can act as a sugar rush. Sometimes this actually happened to me as a player. We had an in media res where we started this game. It was actually I mentioned the other day a Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign using, I forget what the supplement was that put it in a Mad Max kind of thing. And that's how we started it. We were literally in some kind of truck, and there was a gun post, and there were bandits or marauders coming up behind us. We had to fight them off and get to town. And I was like, boom, quick start, right? Oh, somebody man the gun. Somebody do this or that. Somebody's trying to climb over the side, knock them off. All right, good. But the problem with this hot start is that it didn't have anything hot afterwards. Like, yeah, all right, we're in town. And then it was just, we're in town. And we didn't have any context. We didn't have any guidance because we didn't know anything, because there wasn't really anything to know, because we just kind of started hot. All right, you're in the truck and you're under fire and you got to get this thing to the town. Great, we get it to Barter Town. And it's like, then what? Well, it was kind of back to the normal kind of thing, and the energy just went like, and I remember people just started kind of goofing around, and I can see there's a job board and some things. I'm trying to be like, hey, you want to look at the job board, guys? Like, kind of think that's what we're, and oh no, it was just, and I think what can happen with that hot start is that hot start was just galvanizing in that moment, and maybe this was a fault of the campaign, the way it was set up, but you might argue that what should have happened was that hot start should have led to kind of a lead, which then leads to another one. But I think ultimately the person wanted to run kind of an open world game and not a narrow narrative game. So that hot start was to kind of get us into the moment, and then they wanted to open it up, but we didn't have any direction. So we just kind of fumbled around where I'm like, hey guys, I think we probably want to do the job board, and some other guys are doing that. And then I think he kind of realized what was happening and sort of had like something happened to then just kind of focus us again. And it was when we were focused into, there's an underground thing. And then my guy got killed by some kind of laser turret. Just unlucky. I was trying to run across an open space. He rolled well, and whatever happened, and I died. But then the game didn't really make it far after that. So that was it. So something to be aware of with the hot start is make sure you got some kind of follow, because that hot start can just kind of fizzle and then it's nothing. I called it the bait and switch start. I wouldn't go that far. I don't think he wasn't trying to switch up the kind of game it was or anything like that, or something basic. It was just that you want to make sure that the hot start, you want to take that heat and make sure it's focused on something. And that can be difficult if you end up wanting to have kind of an open world sort of sandbox game when you're focusing, this energy's coming, and then it's just people are going to go kind of off to the winds. Whoops. No, Sorian says, yeah, because the hot start is served for you, and then you jump into the open world, and people may just start thinking or checking their cell phone. Yeah, I mean, this was play by post, so I don't know if anyone couldn't tell what anyone was checking, but there was definitely at least a loss of momentum. This momentum just stopped propelling you. So in this game, for this one, I said, well, you guys have already explored the world, and in their backstories, what they come up with, they both decided to be sort of undead hunters who were looking for undead. And I think I'll just recap if you happen to miss that when I talked about that. Well, they're undead hunters, and they met when they were both on the road, happened to be in the inn at the same time, and it just coincidentally there happened to be undead that attacked that inn while they're in it, and they were able to sort of what they did was they bonded in this moment of terror. They recognized each other as these, we both hate undead and we're willing to stand up to them. And they kind of went, back to back or whatever, formed a wall to allow others to escape. And they fought off this weirdly coincidental undead attack, given that you had two undead hunters in a place and an undead attack, which, strange, right? Coincidental, sure. And that's what they did. So I decided, I'm not going to go and try to just push them into something, because I want to let them get the lay of the land a little bit. And with my game, especially, I only have 2 players. I don't feel the need to kind of rush it. I'm totally fine. And I think sometimes, especially when I'm just starting, because this is a new area of the world, it's not directly connected to Nob Hill. It's not going to be super far away, but it's not right next to it. So it gives me a chance to kind of, see what they're kind of thinking. What are they leaning towards? What are their ideas of things, and sort of feel them out, let them sort of, get the lay of the land, and really just kind of let them go. Because I thought, well, they don't know this particular landscape, but I think now they have a good idea. But it was kind of a bit of a fumble, and I probably should have given them, say, a warm start. Something to kind of put them. So they go into town, and this was during, and part of this though, the other part though, was this kind of started during the game where the guy was driving, and I wasn't going to do a whole lot. So I'm not going to give him some hot lead, because I don't want them to follow it. Like, I'm going to give you a hot lead, and you're going to want to go up and explore it. And I'm going to go, well, we're going to stop the game here, because I don't want to get into really tense situations when one of you is driving a car and can't really look at anything of theirs. And I don't have their sheets at the moment. And I was like, I just didn't want to deal. I'm like, we're just going to take it easy. So that was kind of one other thing. I was like, yeah, I'm going to let it kind of simmer. So then this week, then they spent that week kind of questioning people, trying to have people tell them. They're like, well, they're trying to figure out kind of basically like where the undead are. Well, where are the undead around here? And we had a little bit of a joking. They actually came up for, they called it restless spirits, because I was saying, well, I said, like, you're telling people, you're asking people about undead, and they're like, what the heck is that? What is undead? I mean, they could have said skeletons. I think I would have, skeletons or zombies or walking corpses, maybe would have been something. They're like, undead. And I'm like, people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then they were like, oh, is there, asking about stories. So in the one town they are, and which is right here, they're in this town called, well, I guess I should go back. Let me, as I'm going out of order, so this area that they're in, which you can see here, I mapped up very roughly. There's even some gaps in here I haven't filled out, and this is probably subject to change in some ways. I'm calling the Valley of the Seven Sisters, where they're these essentially kind of city-state type situation, kingdoms, but they're tiny. And unfortunately, what happened was I'd done more work in Worldographer, and I must have, I don't know if my laptop crashed or something happened, and I lost it. So I had these actually labeled, and I had the borders, and I lost it. So I'm gonna have to put those back in at some point. But if you can imagine, essentially each one of these city, town, kind of city-state sort of little petty kingdoms is only maybe 3 hexes. It's like this is one kingdom, or maybe this one's this kingdom, and then this one here is this kingdom on this side of the river, and this one is maybe like that. And you can kind of see, roughly speaking, pretty much each one of these I think gets three hexes, and there are these grassy areas actually have lots of little villages and hamlets in them. So you have kind of or at least, so like where this one is, Latria is, it's on a hill, and then below the hill there's all kinds of little villages and stuff, and then in here and foresting, and then the real wilderness stuff comes in when you're coming kind of on those outskirts areas. I mean, the real nasties. But I haven't totally got it figured out, and since they don't, I'm okay with that, because they're going to spend some time mucking around, and I'll roll dice and figure out, oh, what is there in here? Because I will eventually fill this up with stuff. But for the moment, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of the basic lay of the land is that they're in and that it's called the Seven Sisters because originally this valley was one united kingdom, and kind of in a King Lear like move, there was a king. He had seven daughters, and he basically divided up the kingdom amongst his 7 daughters, and then he died. So each one got a piece, so one got this one, one, basically all of these. And there have been wars and battles and all kinds of stuff, but nobody has managed. They've been in this kind of uneasy peace where no one has managed to take full advantage. There have been, and this is what I explained to the guys in time, there have been stories where at one point, or kind of in history, or ancestors, whatever, that for a while one person had control of 2, maybe 3 cities, but then it would kind of fall apart. And so at the present day, it's kind of in this sort of tense, but sort of Cold War-ish, but tense sort of detente between the 7. So they're always vying, always looking for how they can assert control, but nobody's done anything yet. And nobody, since the old king died, has been able to actually unite all the whole valley. And I stuck them in Latry. So I put them sort of in not necessarily, it's kind of the most podunk of the towns. It's kind of in the interior. This was the old capital that was kind of out, the one that was sort of facing the bastion against the outside for the most part. The river flows from this mountains, and that's also increasing your elevation. So this is kind of towards lowlands, and then through the valley, you're getting some elevation, and then up here, serious elevation. So you have the kind of mountain lake. And I actually had put something here that there was some kind of religious something or other up here. I'm not sure of a shrine, a monastery, something. I think maybe at one point there was maybe there still is some religious significance to the locals about this kind of lake, because it's a bit like here is the kind of the source of everything. Everything good comes from the river. The river is what flows through. The river ties the valley together. The river was a big source of movement, and there's a road that follows the river as well. But the river is definitely faster. All this stuff. So I kind of thought it would be nice if here's the source of the river, that they kind of gave it some significance. So that's the generic setup, and I have not, and we can maybe work on that tonight or whatever. I haven't filled out kind of all this stuff here, but definitely in the hexes where these capitals, petty capitals are, it's essentially villages all through there. All the things that support these towns, the villages, the grazing fields, whatever. And then, of course, as you move further away, get more grazing, whatever, and then it's kind of more wild. So that's where we're at now. The party in our one true game game session, which was on Thursday. Definitely don't anger the river gods. They were looking around for a storyteller. This is what they're kind of doing during the first kind of game. They were looking around for a storyteller, they're looking for undead. Tell us about your undead. Are there any undead here? Any undead here? Raise your hands, and they weren't having very much success with that. And they came up with I think though they actually came up with it in the second session, came up with this idea of calling them the restless spirits. Has anyone seen restless spirits? Well, that's a good term that people would probably get. People would probably get restless spirits as a thing. But there was a tale about Latry that there's a big necropolis kind of in the hill. So Latry is on top of a hill, and then in the hill is basically all this big necropolis. And then every once in a while, something comes out of the necropolis and grabs somebody and leaves. Essentially, the way I explained to them is, if a missing person comes up, every once in who knows how long, somebody goes missing and they never found, then you hear whispers of the necropolis, something from the hand, the dark hand of the necropolis kind of came up and grabbed it. Now, I also mentioned them. There's not an entrance to this necropolis. Nobody knows where this, if this thing is true. Nobody's seen it. Nobody's heard of it. They've only heard the tales. Nobody's seen it. Nobody's been down there. Nothing like that. I did give them not necessarily a clue, but one of the places that they were kind of hanging around trying to information gather, and they had no money either. And they're like trying to, all these people to just kind of give them info for free. And when people start asking for some coin in exchange, they're like, we're broke. You're like, well, get back when you have some money. But they asked kind of, well, is there a central square and anything? I was like, yeah, there's a square and there's a well in the square, and this is where at least one of several wells where people come to get their water. And I did mention that the well is really deep. The well that they, you have to, you put the chain. I said, okay, they come and they put they put their bucket on a chain, and they really letting it go, and they were trying to be nice and like talk up these kind of the women and other folks who were doing, women and kids and men who were doing this kind of work, and they and they were saying, oh, let me help you, let me wind up, or use the power or crank the well to get the bucket back. And I'm like, yeah, it's a long, hard kind of pull. It's going. And I thought maybe this might cue them in that maybe there's a little bit of truth to it, but so they're also on a hill. So it's also there. It could very well be that just the water is deep. But I was thinking about if this, and I haven't decided whether this necropolis story kind of thing is true or not, but if it's true, I was thinking, well, the well, something using the well to get up and down, if there was some kind of entrance from below that hit the well and then they climbed up the well, that would definitely be an entrance to the necropolis. But that hasn't explored yet. So what they decided to do was go into a nearby village, because they were looking for, they went to so one of them's I call a friar, right? Like a cleric. And they're with the Order of the White Flame, which is kind of the sort of monotheistic religion in these parts, also in Nob Hill too. And they have the part of the friars shtick is part of their class features is they can get free room and board if there is a church, if there's an order chapter house or a church, something, they can go and they can apply, and brothers, the family of the White Flame will take them in, so they can go and they can always have a place to stay and kind of eat. But the cost is that they have to, whenever they go somewhere new, they have to submit themselves that chapter house, and that chapter house can send them on adventures, essentially, or give them tasks to do. So you're supposed to go in, if you're if you're a friar and you go into a new town, you're supposed to basically present yourself at wherever the church is or the order, and then the abbot or the hierarchy are both required to take you in, but they can also send you out. No, Saurian, I'm letting them run with it right now, the both of them. I may change that later once they start getting some money. But I'm letting him do it. It's just two of them. If there was five, I'd be like, the guy saying like, no, you can't all stay here. For the moment, I'm letting them run with it. But it can also be something that can be up to individual church folk. I'm not going to make it necessarily a hard and fast rule. See you, Frederick. But I might right now I'm letting them roll with the two of them. But that can change anytime, because there's nothing in the bylaws that says that they get a +1. I'm being nice. So for the moment, they can do. They're allowing 2, but it could change anytime. So they went to the order, and I had said that for this first game session that he'd already done the applying at the local church, and that they didn't have anything from. But they went back because they figured it, which is not true, that this could also be a source of information. So they pull some guy aside, and they're like, "Hey man, you know about undead?" Or now they're calling them restless spirits, and the guy's like, "I sure, I know. I mean, we haven't had any around here. Don't know, don't." But they kind of use this person to really just validate their own ideas, because they're like, well, does it seem like a good idea if we go hang around some graveyards? And the guy's like, sure. And I had to remind them, I said, don't look at these NPCs like they're the word from me, that I'm giving you the thumbs up on or thumbs down on some ideas. Like, you gotta, I tried to remind them, like, you got to take these guys with a grain of salt when they're just telling you stuff, because they don't rightly know. And you don't look at them and think like, oh yeah, here's the source of truth from and coming from the mouth of God to our ears, because Todd said that they said that oh, this is a great idea, this is a horrible idea. It's like that's not how that works. But they did decide, okay, we're gonna go check out one of these local graveyards. And I mentioned that in these, they have the main town here, and then it's on a hill, and then underneath the hill in the grasslands, there's a bunch of these different villages kind of clustered around, and they don't all have a church, but if at least for one kind of cluster, there'll be a church building there. So they find one, and they decide to kind of stake it out for the night. And during that stakeout, it was attacked, or at least they were definitely assaulted. So they were kind of wandering around the graveyard, and I talked about how they heard kind of a fell voice on the wind, and then these dark, shadowy shapes kind of rose out, seemed very sort of zombie-like out of the turf in the graveyard. They kind of bolted in different directions. One of the guys has the ability to kind of amp up his speed, his sort of natural stuff. So he kind of put on his speed burst and raced out of there. The other one went to the church, and there was an outbuilding attached to the church, and there was a they had checked in with this priest who was there, and so he went back to that outbuilding, woke up that priest, and was like, there's restless dead. There's restless dead. And the priest was kind of like, like stumbling over himself, but also a little bit like, what the F? Like, you guys had been talking about restless dead, then suddenly there's restless dead here. Like, what's the dealio? But as they're sort of getting geared up, or the priest is fumbling to get some kind of clothes on. The two are separate. I mentioned that the guy who's in the outbuilding, there was an exterior door to this outbuilding, and then an interior door that connects to the main body of the church, the building of the church, and that he could see flickering light from inside the church. And he was sure that when they first showed up that it was just dark, because it was after hours. He went to open the door, and the door wouldn't open. Just just wasn't open. And then he's asking the priest, he's like, hey, your door's locked. And the priest is like, there's no lock on that door. So they're like, oh, okay. By this time, the other one's coming back, and they keep looking for the undead, but it's night, and the guy had run pretty far, and undead, whatever they were, weren't moving. The guys had both like raced out of the circle, and so they never really figured out what those shadowy things were. And then they're kind of trying to figure out what's going on, and then they kind of reunite at the outbuilding. Then they decide, well, we're going to go look in the front of the building. And when they move around the front of the building, they can see that the double doors, your main church doors, it's ajar a little bit, and of course they can see light coming inside. Well, they're super cautious, and the one's there, and he's looking in the crack, and I'm like, well, you can see there's light. You see like something move across the light, but then you don't see anything else. Then finally they pull the door open, and they see the interior of the church for the first time. And I show them it's kind of a rough hewn, it's kind of a country sort of church. It's not the most delicate thing, but that a pew had been moved across that door to the priest's chamber. So that someone had put something up against it so the priest couldn't open the door. So that was one thing. There was another outer door, which was open a little bit. And there was the altar, your priestly sort of altar spot. And the altar had been moved aside. And that when they went to investigate, underneath the altar was some kind of cavity and it was not and they were looking for some kind of portal or like there was going to be stairs down to a dungeon. I'm like, no, there's nothing like that. There's just this cavity, and it seems fairly clear there was something in that cavity, a box, a little chest, not something, well, not a huge chest, but something, it's a few feet by a few feet by a couple feet, like 3 by 2 or something like that, and a few feet deep. Like something was probably in there and it's gone. So that's where we ended the session with this kind of mystery of, okay, who did this? What did they take? Whatever. So that's kind of the start of the thing. Now, something I was thinking about is kind of the, are they being watched? It's kind of one of my, so, as usual, I do stuff sort of off the, I don't know, off the cuff's the right word, but I kind of will roll with things and then I'll try to piece together. I'll have something happen, either the dice will do it or I'll think of it or whatever. And in this case, what I did do is when they went to the graveyard, I rolled for a wandering monster and I got the check. And instead of rolling on the other tables, I rolled on the undead table. And that's when I got zombies. So at least my idea was zombies, but they never actually touched them. And I kind of like the idea that they never touched them. They were shadows, nothing there. So I'm wondering, was it really undead or was it like, an illusion or something like that? Because they never interacted with them. So I didn't have to make that choice. But once I got undead, I'm like, okay, something's happening here. And I've been playing around with this idea in my brain that I've been thinking about, is this idea of what I mentioned a little bit earlier about in their backstories, there was this kind of coincidental happening. You have two of these people who are out there hunting undead, happen to be at the same place at the same time, and lo and behold, that place where they both happen to be is attacked by undead. Seems highly coincidental. It would seem almost that someone or something certainly seemed to be aware of them in some way. I mean, it seems like, why would you pick this particular time to do this? And why would you do it at all? What's the aim? I mean, if it's not just wild undead, right? If you have a couple of choices here. One is, it was, I don't know, unnatural. Cause I talked about sort of something I mentioned to them is conceptually about undead, given that they're kind of undead hunters. I'm like, there's kind of two ways you can go about it. There's sort of negative energy and places could kind of just sort of by its own nature eventually gain enough, I don't know, get entry into bodies and things and animate them under the right conditions. This is going to kind of happen without any, essentially you can have without any intelligent intervention, undead can spring up just because of the nature of things and the nature of negative energies and the things like that. Like you can have a place like a battlefield full of just negative energy. And when it finds that there are these vessels it can fill, it will seep into those vessels. And if it's enough and it's concentrated enough, whatever, it will, the animation will happen. So that's one way undead can come about. And of course, the other way undead can come about is if someone is making them, a necromancer's coming around and manipulating negative energy to do these things. No, Sorian says it doesn't even have to be something you clearly thought about yet, but it serves its purpose, and then you can connect it to other things on the campaign along the way. Yes, I mean, I tend to do that a lot. I'm not trying to say that as a humble brag. It's just kind of my mode. I'll stuff will happen, and then I'll try to see, well, how does this stuff that I came up with or the dice told me, how does it relate? So you have your two choices, right? In their backstory, okay. Was it just they were in the right place at the right time? I mean, at least in terms of if you're one of the people who was in that inn, thank goodness these two guys happen to be here when, for some reason, undead attack the place. Hey, Inkpen, no, you're not particularly late. Was it just white place, white time? Did the undead happen to just attack here and just, gosh, aren't we lucky that two undead hunters happen to be here when undead attacked? Seems unlikely. Or is it that there was some force that maybe has been monitoring them on their little journey, or obviously they're level 1, so it's just the very beginning of their journey towards something, and decided to test them, kill them, do something, thwart them in some way. Saw that hey, look, I got a great chance here. There's two of them, but they're both here at the same time. I'm here. let me bring my undead minions to bear, and I can crush them now and get these 2 pieces off the board. They may be pawns now, but they might turn into queens later, and I'm not going to take the risk. Let me just get them out of the way. Of course, it doesn't work, but that's the thought process, which I think is, in terms of like a bad guy, sort of a villain. I mean, I think that's a good plan. These guys, they're not threats now, but they're asking them the right questions, and they're looking in the right places where I happen to be or I want to be. So I'm not going to mess around. I'm just going to take them out. I'm going to take them out in a way that won't finger me. I won't get fingered directly. It'll be, it's a nice thing with undead is if everybody's dead, kind of hard to track, especially in the case of the inn where he burns the inn down as part of the whole assault. No, sorry, I'm talking about Tolkien and the One Ring. Yes, indeed. So I've decided that their backstory, some villain was already watching them for whatever reason. Probably because their villain is having something to do with undead, and they're killing undead or trying to. So they're definitely across purposes. These are anti-undead guys, and this person is a pro undead guy of some sort. So now the question comes up with this first encounter, or this encounter that they've actually got to fight through, is, was this that same necromancer? Is this same, or whatever this person, I don't even know, Price calls it a necro-cultist. Was it the same person or group? It could be a cult, multiple people who are still kind of have them marked and came after them. And then, of course, what did they get out of the church? I don't know. I kind of had in my brain when the encounter first came up that the church, that the undead, I always had in my mind, for whatever reason, that the undead, I'm just going to put church, graveyard, undead encounter. Oh, just one encounter, not 2. Thank you. I always had in my mind that it was a diversion. I'm going to put zombies in quotes because one thing I kind of liked as I was thinking about it afterwards, maybe it was an illusion, which kind of helped play with the fact that maybe this person isn't super high level yet, but they've got some illusion magic and they threw it out there thinking it would keep them busy, and it worked. It didn't necessarily work the way they maybe had laid it out, but it worked in terms of it gave them enough time to get out. But I don't know what, and I don't need to know necessarily right away, because I don't think that I don't think that, I'm just going to call him the villain right now. I don't think that the church, the abbot, is going to know what was in that little void. But my first thought was, what was in the void? I kind of like the idea of a reliquary of some sort, because if you've ever gone to a cathedral or something, this is not a cathedral, but it doesn't, this is not Earth either. So I feel like some kind of saint or some holy person there might be pieces of them scattered around. Maybe it's part of what sanctifies these graveyards, which would be an interesting idea. Why, if this is illusory, maybe these churchyard cemeteries are protected by relics, and these relics remove them, and that makes these places vulnerable to, then you can come in, because maybe you couldn't come in and literally raise undead here because it's protected, but get rid of that reliquary, maybe it's protected. The other thing is, well, what could you do if you're able to get enough of this holy person? What happens if you animate them? Like, what might you unlock if you are able to animate in a negative energy way? If you can, and obviously with the kind of control dominate aspect. A holy undead. I'm thinking that might be really good if you're or really bad if someone's able to put together however many pieces of the saint and try to bring them back, but under your control, because they have this kind of power about them, right? The saint, okay, you think, well, the saint's soul is long gone. Maybe, sure. But clearly these relics have power. And what if you're able to flip that power? What if they've had this power that's been essentially sanctifying land, grounds around them, and each little piece is able to sanctify a good area? Now you put them all together and you flip it. Now it's like, maybe this is like a desecration thing. Maybe it's going to empower thing. Like, there's kind of I feel like there's a lot of neat possibilities there. So maybe this is this initial person or cult's plan is to, it's kind of like they're able to kind of like do two things at once. They're able to, one, weaken the sanctifying effects so that they can come in and start getting more for their undead armies. Two, once they have enough pieces of this saint, they can do something really nasty. They can take it up several notches. I really like the idea. I think I'm gonna, it's nothing's codified till it hits the table, but I'm gonna make a. I don't know if he's a necromancer yet or she or whatnot, but I'm just gonna put that for here, and then I'm gonna put, let's see, is collecting relics of a long dead holy figure. I'll have to figure out who that holy figure is. I misspelled collecting. Thank you. And then, so this is, I don't know, desanctifying. I'll just put it like that. Sanctifying graveyards, making them vulnerable to their negative sorcery. See, Brian Smith said, yeah, all they can do is throw some shoddy illusions out while they snatch some item from the church. Maybe a cleric that didn't work out and stormed out, now trying to form a group. Maybe. Nosorian said that idea made them think about enemies which can't take out the players directly but need to harass and set up traps instead. Hasn't explored that enough. It can be fun. I mean, it's the one thing you got to be careful with. Well, they're not desecrating. It's just removing the sacredness, but not flipping it the other way. It's not turning it into bad. It's just making it normal. So that's why I use desanctifying. The careful thing you have to be with Nosorian is, if you have somebody that's relying on tricks and traps, that's all cool. But you can fall into your own trap, which is that the party catches up to this person probably sooner than you'd like to. And then you're kind of a little bit like stuck. And that's where you can end up with like them like getting away kind of by something. And it can feel kind of cheap, right? We're like, oh no, they caught up to this guy who's supposed to be doing tricks and traps, but did something, and now they're past all the tricks and traps, and now my guy's here, and I don't have like a thing for him because he's supposed to be weak and everything, but I don't want him to die, so now I got to find some cheesy way because I'm stuck in the moment to escape. You just want to be careful. Like, I think this is that problem when you put your enemies too close to the players, right? That people, it's always funny when I read about it, but I'm sure I've done it myself. And I think everybody goes through a phase where you want the party to meet the guy. I want them to meet the big bad evil guy, but they don't know it's the big bad evil guy. And right now he's weak, but then 20 levels later, he's going to be super strong, but they're only level 2 right now. So I made the big bad evil guy only level 2. And then, they do something and they say the wrong thing. And the party's like, kill that man. And all of a sudden you're like, oh geez, that was the big bad guy. And, and then you're scrambling. So be careful. And the other thing with the tricks and traps thing, maybe even it's more the primary thing, is when they're too convenient that they like match exactly. Like, oh, you fell into the trap. That's like, you want to make it feel like it's clever, but not like metagame clever. Because you as a GM, your players' patterns. Like, okay, every time they go into a dungeon, they always turn left. So this guy's going to put this trap right when they turn left, and that's going to be great. And the party, and then it's like, okay, And in that example, the first time it happens, maybe the party's like, ha ha ha, all right, that was we were sloppy. But then it can get to be like, okay, it feels like our moves are being accounted for in a way that's a little bit too foreknowledge-y, a little bit too seems like the GM wants us to hit these traps, So just be careful. Be careful. It can be fun, Brian Smith. I mean, everything can be fun. The problem is that oftentimes GMs aren't ready for that or don't want that kind of fun. And that's always the number one thing, right? It's fun if they short circuit this big bad evil guy and there's somebody else, right? There's always somebody else. But as I'm sure you've seen, as we've gone through and read Reddit and you've seen Reddit stuff, a lot of folks aren't ready for that. They're like, I planned for this guy and I'm not ready to let him go. I'm not ready for it. It's not what I wanted to do. This is my, because people, as a GM, you can fall in love with characters just as much as players do. And you had in your mind some, this is going to be this, this climactic thing and all this stuff's going to come out and it's going to be, and then it's like, oh, it's gone. And it's also like you're caught in the moment, right? And that's the other part, which is why I've always said, like, if you feel like you're scrambling, like take that 5-minute break. Say, all right, I need a moment to think about things, or, oh my gosh, you guys did something I didn't expect, which players always love anyway. And then go, okay, I need to take a minute, because you get hasty and then you start to scramble. And that's when I think a lot of our worse, poorer habits come rising out. So when we had time to think about it, you go, oh yeah, sure, there's another guy. But then in the moment, you're just like, I need to save my guy. You're not thinking about necessarily the bigger picture. Right, so they treat their villains like a funnel, just throw lots of potential baddies at them. If some do get away, I flush them out more. Yep. I mean, I think that's an excellent way to do it. But I mean, this is kind of, I don't want to say it's the unfortunate thing, but people have all these literary, right? A lot of folks come in there from the, like, I'm going to write the grand story. And that approach doesn't work with the grand story. Hey, Jason. It works when you're flexible, but if you have your mind set on, let's say I'm going to have Smeagol, who's going to end up turning into Gollum at some way, and then that's going to be his whole thing, and at the end of Mount Doom, Frodo and Gollum are going to have this epic struggle, and it's going to be awesome. Then you're kind of like, my whole narrative thing kind of falls apart of if Bilbo in The Hobbit decides to just stab Gollum in the back and leave him down in the dust in the bottom of the Misty Mountains and then go on his way. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's, if you're coming from the Sandbox kind of thing, and it's like, yeah, next man up. But a lot of folks don't necessarily come from it from somewhere. I mean, I think, in the OSR, it's definitely more open like that. But, I try to say things that don't, I try not to prejudge what everyone's doing, everyone's playing. And it's also a player anticipation expectation thing, because some players want that too. They want this literary experience. And there is, you don't really get that as much in some of, especially if the players have free reign to just kind of blow things up as they will. Null Terminator says, the 5e game that got mothballed last year put a really bad taste for plans in my mouth. What happened, Null Terminator? Let me know. I want to, if you can type it up in the chat, I'd love to hear it. I mean, plans are dangerous. It's fine to have them. But I think if you can do the Brian Smith thing, or like what I try to do is think about, like, everything's in pencil. I just try to remind myself everything's in pencil. And I mean, the thing is I feel like whatever comes up next is going to be cool. Like that, I guess I always come at it like, okay, well, this thing was cool and it didn't work. But there's always something cool around the corner. I'm going to make it work. I'll figure out kind of what plays into it. And that's kind of the fun, right? I mean, I put up this short earlier this week. It didn't I mean, nothing of mine has gone viral at all, but it didn't get a lot of views, but I got more commentary. And that's when I said that as a player, I don't really want to get into the co-creation business. I don't love it as a player. Not that it can't be fun. I'm not trying to throw shade at people who think they're. I know Frederick, who was here earlier, was saying that that's something that he's found helps players in his game a lot, is that co-creation stuff. But like, I get that as a GM. Like, the GM is, when I'm GMing, and that's when I'm doing all this creating stuff, which I love. When I'm a player, I want to get embedded in this other creation and then be able to monkey with it and have the world respond to me. Like, that to me is the really cool thing. And I feel like to a certain point, some kind of levers, whether it's through co-creation, whether it's through something else. But I think we talk about player engagement, I to me think like a lot of it comes from when you know that the stuff you're doing has an effect on the world in a real meaningful way. Because you in some games, and they're not bad games, some games that you can do little things, but in the end, whether you want to say you're on rails or whatnot, there's only so much you can manipulate the world. The world's going to kind of keep going, much like a computer role-playing game, most of them anyway, where you can do a little bit of mischief and you can be on the bad guy list or the good guy list to do some stuff, but there are just hard borders, right? There are hard stops at which you can't do beyond because the story has to be able to function, right? And I think that there are games that run themselves a lot like that. It's like, well, you can do this or that, but eventually the story is going to kind of rubber band you back towards the middle of the field. Like in a holodeck, you're going to get the world's going to kind of warp around you, but you're still going to be kind of in this thing. Whereas I think, and some players are totally fine with that. And I think sometimes players are really engaged who really love the kind of narrative, literary aspects. They kind of want that. They want to be in this spark because that's where that's the sweet spot for your narrative is, right? But I think for a lot of folks, they want to feel like if they're going to go and burn down the church is going to burn, and then the church burns, and then it feels like the world has actually changed, and not just you wake up the next day and there's another church there, or nothing seems to happen. And I wonder, and I don't know this, but I wonder if that's why in some games where there isn't that sense of things really happening, in other words, there's no real cause and effect. You burn down the church, the law doesn't come after you, nobody really looks at you, then you kind of start looking around like, well, what else? What do I got to do to get noticed? And then, but the GM's thinking like, oh gosh, I don't want to arrest them for burning a church because that's not in my, how are they going to do this story that's in this town if they get kicked out of the town or put in jail? So I'm just not going to really, they're going to get away with it. And then they just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. So they finally get you into some kind of box where it's like, I can't function. I cannot function if I can't do these things. Let's see. An alternative says with a demon infested heart, then there's a real plan where the players can just take a hard left and throw it all out. That's true. Jason says, trying to talk about dragons with in polite company. Oh, wait a minute. I missed the bit about Sunless Citadel. Oh, okay. Hold on. So this was Sunless. So it was a 3E adventure path, starting with Sunless Citadel, ends with a showdown with an ancient red dragon with a demon-infested heart. Then there's a real plan where the players can just take a hard left and throw it out. I see. Yeah, that's the thing with adventures. I find that actually running adventures in many ways is more difficult than running your own stuff because when the players do take a hard left, it's in your own world. I feel like you're more equipped to be able to roll with it. When it's the adventure, you're looking for, what does the adventure say? And it's like the adventure says nothing. And the adventure has no options for you because the adventure can really only give you that one track. I know there's sandboxy stuff where I'm talking more in the sort of classic narrative, more linear style adventures. But yeah, it's tough because the adventure's like, oh yeah, they do this, that, and the other, and this, that, and the other. And then if your players just suddenly go off that, then it's like, well, how do I get them back to this, or do I just throw out the adventure now, or what do I do? But I find if it's your own thing, then you're much more in tune with it, and I think it's it's yours, so you feel more, I don't know, not allowed is the right word, you almost feel more like it's yours, so you can mess with it. Like I'm not trying to change up, because you might feel like, well, I'm not an authoritative enough GM to be able to mess with this and do something good with it, but it's mine, then I can mess around with all I want, almost like an imposter syndrome kind of thing. Maybe empowered is the word. You don't feel empowered to just mess things up. Ryland says that liches make great big bad evil guys because they just go back to their phylactery at the party kills them at the first meeting, built-in plot armor. That's true. Though it's the problem with liches is that they're super high level. So not that it's a problem, but if they, it might seem weird if they just allow themselves to be killed, or what circumstances they're getting killed early. I'm assuming your party's low level. If you're playing a high level adventure, then that's different. But yeah, liches like dragons can be cool like that. Not so much because they can't be killed, but just like they're powerful, they're intelligent, and they have the things I like about dragons and liches are kind of similar, is that they have, for the most part, you can give them fairly simple, understandable goals. You know, you could say about like your classic Smaug red dragon type dragon wants loot, and then wants to sit on it and maybe cover the land in ash, something like that. These are very simple things that players can sort of really grasp, and you can communicate and you can have fun with the dragon talking and playing all this stuff about dragons being a little bit snooty and, you know, arrogant, so that they will talk to players and will kind of taunt them and will do these things. And you can kind of play in the fact of why they just don't destroy them from jump, kind of thing. When you're doing some of these other things, they can get the plots can get really complicated, and it can be hard for the party to kind of pick up on what the heck's going on, and it can be really engaging for some folks, but can also be just like, I don't know what's going on. I just want to know the thing I'm supposed to defeat. I don't know all this, that, and the other, and like just put me in the direction of the thing that I need to kill. Jason says, after playing RPGs for 30 years, I ran their first published adventure this year. That was my exact experience. Felt chained. Yeah, it can be tough. That's why I tend to like the adventures that are kind of like little mini sandboxes with a bunch of stuff and kind of a loose narrative that you can follow or not. So if your party kind of derails it, they're not really derailed, kind of thing. Okay, so Jay says because they felt there was a plan or author intent, they didn't want to rob their players. Yeah, I feel you there. I definitely feel there's this thing of like, oh, I want to give them, like, this is the thing I'm supposed to be giving them, and now, you know, they're not getting it. But yeah, if it's your own thing, then you don't care, so it doesn't matter. I'm just going back to necromancy here, so I write this down before I forget. So he wants to collect the relics of a long dead holy figure that's scattered around. Presumably, there's at least one associated, probably a couple with each one of these. I could come up with what body parts they are at some point. And doing that will desanctify the graveyards, making them more vulnerable if they want to pull up these souls or these bodies anyway, for undead. And then eventually, maybe the eventually plans to animate a negative I don't know, inversion, reflection, no, I don't know, a negative, I guess I'll just put version for right now, of the holy figure that unleashes some unholy power effects. We can figure this out later. Just want to write it down now so I don't forget. But that's good. So we got this here. And this happened in Laytree, which is where the hex which the players are in, which I had labeled, and then I lost my my updated file. So something happened to it. I don't know what. No, sorry, said that ghosts can work similarly and they are lower level. Well, I'm not sure if it's in the rules, but I have ghosts come back if some issue is unresolved. Yeah, I definitely have, and I'll be running with this, is that you can't permanently destroy undead without something more. Like you can't just, you could turn them, you can kind of destroy them through turning, but they're not permanently destroyed. Like they're out, but then they'll, if something else, the idea in my head is that if there's some source of this negative energy going on, you have to get rid of that before you can permanently disable. You have to kind of sanctify the area. The place has been desecrated. You need to sanctify it. It's not just as easy as just, oh, I'm just going to come through and roll 11 and destroy. So I kind of like that for all undead. Ghosts are interesting because if you're looking for what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of a messenger type or something like that. Ghosts are good because, like, my guys right now, they don't have any magic items. They don't have anything. So a ghost comes along, they can't really destroy it anyway. I mean, they can't damage it. So if I wanted to have a ghost come up and start, the ghost could have some fun with them in terms of being an irritant, but what I think you'd really use it for that might be interesting is as a way of communicating with them. Maybe the necromancer will send a ghost at some point to try to tell them to buzz off or, give it up or not, right? And you could send the ghost having at least some sense that this ghost, or maybe a phantom, I don't know what, exactly what stat block, whatever, ghost, phantom, spirit, whatever, is going to be fairly impervious to what the characters can do due to it being, not material. It merely existing only in the sort of astral, ethereal plane. Nosorian says that there's no little experience with published adventures. Read some to steal things, but don't feel they have a very informed opinion about the topic. Yeah, I tend to do the same thing. I tend to not play them. I tend to just read them and get good stuff from them, or stuff that if I like it, good stuff, which I tend to find. But I tend to read modules, especially for the channel, ones I've heard good things about. So I have had good luck. I haven't been lately reading like modules. I'm like, oh, this is awful, because I'm not doing it just to read them, if that makes sense. Like if I pick up something and I put it on the channel, I schedule it to read, it's because I've heard about it. People have been telling me it's really good. There's some buzz about it, something positive. I have not gone on a spree of like, let me look up maybe it'll be fun, but I don't know. I'm not trying to be negative like that. I'm not trying to, if somebody, I was thinking like, well, maybe I could go to drive-through and like do some kind of inverted, let me rate by most highly rated, and then go to the last page to see the most lowest rated stuff. But one, I'm not trying to pick on people if they've released something and everyone's opinions are like those body parts everyone's got one of, and then I'm not trying to do that. I want to read good stuff. I would be happy to only cover stuff that is excellent. But yeah, I don't run them. I don't run them myself. It'd be a good exercise. I mean, the closest I did was I was putting B2 in my game. I did put the Caves of Chaos in there, and they ran through a bit of it. But then bad things happen, and so we didn't really get to put it through its entire paces. It was an interesting experience throwing the caves in there, I have to say, because it's not my usual mode. Let's see what else is going on. So this is what they did. Now we left the session with them still in the church, but we're out of initiative, and essentially it was okay. You can go back to kind of exploratory, or whatever, ask questions, whatnot. I had a name for the guy. Ron says that magic mouth is another way to convey messages. Yes, I think those stuff's really good. I think you should. I think all those things are good. I think another thing is that people get frustrated with. I've heard this whole thing. I don't buy it. I get the logic behind it, but I don't like it. Where I've heard GM say this, like, "Hey, let the big bad evil guy talk." Right? I've heard this spoken multiple times. You get into the end fight. The GM wants to monologue with the big evil guy, and the sort of meme answer is like the big bad guy opens his mouth to say something, and the wizard goes fireball, and then initiative's on, and it's on, right? And it's combat's on, and then the monologuing moment is lost. And I've heard all these appeals, not all these. I've heard these different appeals from GMs is to let them monologue. So the one is that this is true, right? So you're rolling initiative, or you're in, because of the way initiative works, you're not in combat, but you're aware of each other, and you're not in a situation where you can surprise them. You're facing the big bad evil guy. The big bad evil guy is facing you. If you just draw swords and go at it, it's just going to be a plain initiative road. You can't roll. You don't get the jump. The wizard saying fireball does not get a jump on the big bad evil guy. So why not let the guy speak his spiel? It doesn't impact you in terms of your combat efficiency. Letting him talk doesn't let him fire first or do anything like that. It's just going to let him talk. And as soon as somebody reaches for their, holster to fire, then you run initiative anyway. So let them talk. Just do it. And the reason being, and I've heard this stuff like, well, I've been setting up this whole game, and I've been running it for weeks or months or years. This is kind of like, and all I ask is at the end of the day, you let Sauron give his speech before this, that, the other. And I think that's kind of lame, actually. And like Ryland pointed out, magic mouth is a good thing. You could have people telling the story up and down the place. I don't feel like this to me is right up there when I see GMs complain on Reddit or somewhere else about they don't feel like they're getting their pat on the back from the players. Like, my players aren't thanking me, or they're not thanking me enough, or they're not showing me enough. It's like, you shouldn't be doing it for that. You shouldn't be doing this because you're trying to get praise, or you're trying to get, oh, you're wonderful, thank you. Is it nice to hear? Of course. I wouldn't say I don't want your players to say thanks and do that, but if that's what you're going to be doing this for, then you're doing this for the wrong reasons. You do it because you like to do it, right? That's it. So by the same token, where I would say, like, well, you don't do it for people to thank you. I say, well, there's no magic. Like, now I get to monologue. And I think we all imagine our monologues are probably a lot better than they are. Let's face it, probably a lot of these monologues are not that great, even though we think on paper we've written them out. Maybe we've said them to each other and ourselves in the mirror. Oh, Yorick, it's probably not Shakespeare quality. Let's probably face facts with that too. And then the other thing, I think, with the monologue, is that there are other ways to do it that are a lot more fun. Magic Mouth, have heralds, have people, have him sending, have them, use some spell to send stuff. Like, there's tons of other options. You do not have to monologue. If you have some important information they need to know, and the only way you can get out is a monologue, then you've probably done something wrong. You should be able to find other ways to communicate your information. You shouldn't require monologue. Should not be required. And you can talk during the fight anyway. Like, you can talk during the fight. You can talk on your turn, say a couple of sentences. You just gotta probably just parse it out, what's reasonable, and then spit it out while you're fighting, if you must. But I think often you need not. No, Soren says they learned the hard way not to put too much work into an NPC. That's just life. And Null Terminator says, you want player thanks, ask what they want in the game at the end of each session, then do that. Yeah. I think even then, I think a lot of these people would probably say they do that. Like, I'm setting up a bit of a straw man, I guess, because I'm not articulating their side of the argument or whatever. I just know that people are human. People want to be thanked. Hey, PSA, thank your GMs. GMs, thank your players for playing. Everyone needs each other. GMs need players. Players need GMs. So everybody thank each other. And yeah, GMs do tend to put more work in, so thank them. But, I think GMs also tend to be the ones that enjoy that work more, but still, thank them. But don't say, oh, I'm the GM, and no, so therefore I deserve monologues, and therefore I deserve thanks, and you get what you get. And maybe if your players were like super into it, they would hear out the bad guy, right? Or you do it in a way that's more enticing to them, or you parse it along in multiple pieces so that you get the message gets out. No one is due anything just because. And, I'm going to do a downer right now, but this was actually honestly shocking to me. Just everybody, be thankful for the folks who are around you. This is apropos of nothing, but I found out that my doctor died last month, and I didn't know. I was set up to go for a physical, and the doctor's office called me and said, hey, he's not, he's feeling sick. He can't come in today. I was like, okay, I'll reschedule it. And I'd kind of gotten away from it, and the doctor's office called me a couple times. I'm like, yeah, shoot, I thought, well, they're calling me because I need to make this new appointment. I was like, all right, I was kind of waiting for kind of my schedule to sort of clear up. I was like, all right, I need to do it. Right. Like, they called me once. I saw the message. The message was just like, hey, it's the doctor's office, calls back. They didn't say anything. I'm like, yeah, all right. Okay. I'm like, all right. I know I got a call. Friday, I call. The number rings and rings and rings. And he's part of a network, and there are multiple doctors in the office. And finally, someone picks up, and I was like, oh, hey, I'm calling for Dr. So-and-so. And then there's kind of this pause, and the lady goes like, oh, I don't know how to tell you this. And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, did he quit? Did he retire? Like, something happened? And he's like, he died. And I was like, holy, like, what the heck? And it turned out that he had called sick on that day I was supposed to come in. And just a couple of days later, he was dead. And I don't know what it was. They said that they don't know what it was, but he got ill, went to the hospital, and within a matter of days was gone. And wasn't like a super old guy, older than me, not super old. So one, hey, everybody, check in. So I always say this to check in with folks, especially folks you care about, check in with them, because here it was like almost a month later, I find out the guy died, and I just felt awful because, this was hanging out there. Whoa, and there was some major thunder outside my house. Somebody on the street screamed. It's given the nature of my story. I'm like, geez, what's going on here? Is the necromancer reached my neighborhood? Check in with folks, and also take care of yourselves, because somebody can be here today and literally gone tomorrow. I want to throw that out there. But now back to our regularly scheduled nonsense. Brian Smith says, what do you think is the most likely for the party to do next session? Probably trying to look for clues about what's going on in the church graveyard. Yeah, I think they're going to investigate. That's going to be the natural thing. I imagine they're going to, I was going to put this guy's information out there. I imagine they're going to question the abbot, but this guy's not going to know anything, I don't think. I don't think he's going to know anything. I might roll some dice about it. His name is, let's see, I gave him a name. I thought they would, it's funny. They didn't ask his name. They just went up and introduced themselves, but then didn't actually ask the poor man his name. Brother Wombereth. I'm going to say he doesn't know. Bryce says, will they find upturned graves or nothing because they were illusions? I think they're going to find nothing. I think I'm going to let it be the mysterious, that they're going to go and they're not going to see where there was anything up from the ground, which is also going to be fun, because what I like about that is that they ran in, these things happening, right? And so they're going out there saying, I'm telling you, there was undead out here, and they're going to go out there. There's nothing going to be there. It's going to kind of put them in doubt, right? So because I know that these guys love to then go run. Something that my party loves to do with my players, they love to go try to get in with the authority figures, or they're constantly asking. Like they asked the guy at the church. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna go check out these undead. Do you want us to tell you what we find?" And the guy's like, "I should probably tell somebody, but not me." Like they're always looking kind of curry favor, or who should we tell? This thing. So I like the keeping kind of mysterious, because if they tell somebody, there's nothing really to show them other than this essentially a robbery took place. So it's going to, and of course, then these guys are going to be potentially linked with it, because nobody had heard of any trouble around here. Then suddenly they show up and the trouble's with them. So it's a little bit of that Ghostbusters bit. I don't know if folks, how much folks remember about Ghostbusters, but one of the little bits was towards the end when they're in the mayor's office, that Walter Peck accuses them of being the source of the disturbances, being that nobody knows, as soon as these guys show up, ghosts show up, because therefore the guys put the ghost there so they could then bust them. And I think that some folks are maybe going to start thinking that about this too, that, hey, wait a minute, these guys are showing up and then these things are happening. Maybe they're the source of it and not the savior, or both. Yeah, they're undead hunters, presumably, at the moment. Could change. They could come in next week and go, oh my gosh, undead business not for us. We're going to start herding sheep. Whatever. Brian Smith asked if they group have any way to detect undead. They actually do, but he didn't take the spell in the next session. He does. He's got a detect undead spell. I forget exactly what it's called. I don't think it's called exactly detect undead. It might be called sense undead, something like that. But yes, he has that spell, didn't take it, which was kind of classic. So that's also going to play in well, because they don't have any, they can't say. It kind of gives that little bit of doubt. They're going to have no evidence. Was it real? Was it an illusion? They don't know. Rylan says, how do I feel about giving the characters of places names that are well known in real life, like celebrities, but that the player characters have no reason to see anything but ordinary? I think it can be fun. I want to, and when I was in a long running game, we would do that all the time. People would give names to characters that they were in movies. There was a really funny one. So I played with these two guys who were brothers, And the movie, what was the movie? It just come out. The Negotiator, if you remember this movie with Samuel L. Jackson and Kevin Spacey. And Kevin Spacey's character was like something like Sabian was his last name, was Sabian, I think. And then we're playing with two brothers, and the one brother was introducing a new PC. So he goes, and we go like, well, what's his name? And he's like, Sapien. But he said Sapien with a P, like Homo sapien. And his brother turned to him and went, dude, it's Sabian. And of course we all laughed because as soon as they said it, it's like we knew, because we'd all kind of seen this movie in this time span. They pulled it from the movie, and it just had like backfire, because now it was like, now he's Sapien, and it was like a whole running joke with like, oh, is he Homo sapien? And like, well, it was funny, but we used to do that a lot. I don't tend to do that in my games, because I don't want people to make. I don't want people to necessarily get notions because of the name, whether they're right or wrong. Especially because I think, and also I would probably want to use it to muck with people. I would, my mischievous sense would probably come out, and I would name things like the opposite of what they are. So some guy, there'd be some like weak, know nothing, level 0 non-fighter named Rambo or something. The tavern keeper named Paris Hilton. Yeah, I don't. And I think sometimes that stuff, it gets jokey. Sometimes it can be hard to get back. I like humor, but I kind of like humor that's driven by what's happening in the game, and not that the game feels like it's a joke. And that can go that way too. But there's no telling, like, if they don't know the reference, but I'm like, if they don't know, like, I would totally, I don't know. I had a character that it was a short run game, but I had a lot of fun with it. The Barbarians of Lemuria, where I was playing a sorcerer type, and I called him Mako, who was the name of the actor who played the wizard character in the original Conan the Barbarian, the guy who's living in a hut by the standing stones. So I gave him that name, but I kind of gave it to him because it was like, it's a reference that you might get, but you might also think like Mako Sharks, and there wasn't like it was something that like was for me, but it wasn't necessarily obvious. So I wasn't calling out, like I wasn't a barbarian named Schwarzenegger or anything like that. So that's kind of where I'll fall down on that. No, if you call your bartender Paris Hilton, that's it. Let's see, Brian Smith says, if they bust that out in an area, would you plan to allow them to find anything deep below? Well, no, the actual spell says that it can penetrate thin barriers, but nothing thick. So Brian Smith's asking about the detect undead spell. It already said not anything thick. So I already said that it wouldn't detect things like underground. Like if they're like I said, in the graveyard, they would not be able to detect what's buried below the earth. But if it was on the other side of like a thin wall, like a house or something, they'd be able to do that. I got that part squared away. But it turned out he didn't take the spell. So it would have been interesting, because I would have it would have forced me to have to declare what the shadows were, essentially, and I didn't have to. So they've given me some wiggle room in terms of the naming of things. Well, now they're kind of out in the country. They're not far. They're like a couple hours outside, walking outside the town, still in this hex. But if you were to zoom in here, so if we were to, obviously this isn't zooming, but the town, like literally, if I was to break this out in sub hexes, the town's kind of by the river on a hill, and there's a whole bunch of little farming communities and little woods and things out here, and they're somewhere out in the hinterland of this hex. So no, I mean, there's wells, but they're not the well that was interesting in the town, which they're outside of. So they're not in the town itself. They walked out there and stayed up all night to catch somebody in the act. 6 mile hexes are these. I've debated whether, and obviously I could redraw this map in other hexes. I've been thinking about, do I want to go with smaller hexes? And I haven't really thought about wanting to go bigger per se, but I saw some things that made me think, oh, maybe a 1 mile hex would be cool, something like that. But these are still 6 miles. So this hex is 30 some odd square miles, basically 31 or whatever, 31 or 32 point, whatever. I don't remember exact equation, but it's some number of on that magnitude of hexes large. So there's definitely a lot of room for some little tiny hamlets and villages and blobby blue in there. At one point, I did have the math. I'm trying to see if I still have the math because I did look up, or I saw somewhere where someone had I don't know, was it a YouTube video or what, where they had the math laid out, which was actually kind of cool, but I don't know if I kept it or not. Half the size of a hex. Hold on, let me try this math. Half the size of the hex squared times 2.598. Does that work? Well, let me see something. Now I've got my own curiosity. Where's the calculator? I'll do it in here so you guys can actually see it. All right, so half the size of the hex squared. So I think I had, so we have a 6 mile hex, so 3 times 3. No, I don't think that works. Times 2.598. Does that come out right? Is that it? No, I don't think that's right. Half the size of the hex squared. Yeah, it's about 32 square miles. Or is that it? Is it? No, it can't be 9. Gosh, I don't remember. It's something like that. They have not rested, Brian Smith. They didn't expend anything, and they didn't get hurt. They haven't rested. They were up all night. So they're going to have to rest coming up if they're not going to get, I mean, they're kind of tired, but I feel like adrenaline. And they haven't really, they did some walking, and then they were just kind of walking around. I mean, they were, walking around a cemetery off and on. But actually the whole night hasn't passed yet either. So they could still go to sleep. They haven't been up the whole, their intention was to stay up all night, but they haven't actually stayed up all night yet. But it's late. I don't think I'm going to have anything else attack them. I feel like they're in a village, so it's fairly settled. They haven't made any enemies yet. There aren't any wild animals running around the town, and they're inside the building. So I feel like it's just a matter of whatever they do in there. They haven't, and like I said, they haven't expended any resources. Well, the one guy did spend some when he amped himself up, and then he went sneaky. So this one class, I might need to amend it a little bit, but basically he has a type of invisibility, but it's like a mental invisibility. So you can go invisible, and he can do that. And I call it, so we have this concept of hero dice in the game. It's a kind of a dice pool. Some abilities make you spend them. Some abilities make you what I call invest them, which is you have to kind of put them aside. And then if you're able to do that ability and sort of like if you were to start an effect and then end an effect on your own volition, you could get your dice back. If you were to start an effect and then let's say like concentration, and then something hit you, and so you lost concentration, you would lose the dice. He has this stealth ability that he invests the dice, and then if he gets caught, he loses them. If he drops the stealth himself, he gets to keep them. So he can potentially use it a few times. But what happened was he put it on because he was afraid of these undead, and then he walked back to the church, walked into the room or like in the doorway, and didn't turn it off and himself. And so then it was his partner and the priest who got to basically have a save to see if they detected him. And he was like, "Oh, but I turned it off." It's like, "Well, you didn't." So they rolled, and then like the other player rolled a 20. So detected him, and then therefore he lost his dice. So one guy's actually down a few resources. The other guy's full resource-wise, but there's no other threats present. So presumably they can rest. They can get their 8 hours, 8 hours, whatever. Kind of whenever they want. So Brother Wombereth is here. The question is now, what happens next? I want to say that and I'll have to figure out, like, I think like the villages and stuff, we'll see. I have 7 of the main towns, and maybe there are kind of seven sort of these churchyards scattered around, and each one has a piece. But the churches or the chapter houses in the towns, in these little, they're capitals, but they're not really cities, so to speak. Those are tougher nuts to crack. So I have a feeling that the person, whoever's responsible, is going to try to get the ones out of the rural areas first. And then at that point, we'll have enough power, gained enough to try to go after the ones that are in the towns. Because I think that's maybe the next thing, is like, what are the next steps? Oh, the other thing, just in terms of the stream, I think I'm going to have to go pick up my wife and daughter. Did that trigger? Nope, that's that. And I'm not sure when that's going to happen. So if I have to quit under short notice, it's because they're going to send me a text saying, come get us. And I imagine, because it's starting to storm outside, that they might do that instead of taking a taxi / Uber. So just keep that in mind if I have to. Let's see. This layout's all mine, but the tool is called Ouija. And you can go to Ouija.io. It is a paid platform, but they have a free tier, which I think is pretty good. Better than some of the other free tiers of apps that I've used. Because I think you get a bunch of boards that you can go and start. And they have them for all kinds of layouts. This is just a blank one that I used. The necromancer could use undead to dig up the saints. The staying safe for 10. Yeah, they might. Yeah, it might be. I mean, part of it might be, which I kind of like, is that they're going to get more powerful, right? They're going to be able to bring more undead and undead type stuff to bear the more powerful they get. So it might be that for the first couple, they have to put in his own legwork. He's going to have to put in that, and then he'll reach a certain point of power when, yeah, maybe they can. Oh, sorry. It's probably can't see that. I'll just. I don't know if you. Yeah, I don't think you can see that. Let me type it in the chat. No, it's good guess. It is Ouija.io. Whoops. Did I type that? I did wrong. Hold on. Sorry about that. Ouija.io. That should hit the chat in a moment. There we go. No, I'm not trying to do that. Oops. I didn't want to do that either. Well, I can always use another. No. This one. There we go. Future plans. Go after rural relics first. Build up power before attempting urban relics. And it'll be cool because you have this kind of natural escalation where he's going to be going for the smaller towns. Then he's going to be going after the cities until the last one. If it gets to this, who knows how this will go? But I'm guessing the head will be in the old capital. Ouija Luigi. Could be. It's a good app. It's a good app. Last relic. Whoops. The head will be in the old gate, which is the capital. The capital is Old Gate. It was the gate. It was the gate. The gate. I was putting parentheses so I remember. I mean, we have some other things to think about in this terms of this bad guy. Like, is question? I guess I'll oh, you know what? Hold on. Wait. Stop that. Stop that. Come here. You. See, sometimes the one thing is sometimes the interface can get a little bit wonky. It's not perfect, but it definitely does the job. Because I do like I want to play with the political aspect. Work 4 with any of the petty kings of the valley. And I don't know, they're not necessarily all kings. I'll just call it rulers. I don't even rulers. Like, is this thing working alone, or does someone want to use this? Does someone want to use this to finally unite the kingdom? I mean, obviously unite the kingdom in some kind of horrible way, but unite nonetheless. Well, maybe there's some tale about that, Rylan. Maybe it was an old church plan. I mean, it's kind of what happens in Christendom, right? With different saints, relics are spread out. You find someone's hand over here and someone's foot over there. I mean, there are probably some good articles out there on. I wonder if there's yes, and sometimes repeated, right? How many hands did this saint have? I don't know. Is there a list of, or maybe I said located? Let's see, 4 shrines. Maybe there's this. Would this work? Just out of curiosity. Is there a list? It's a good article, but I don't think it's giving us a list. Okay. Is there a, oops. Uh, 150. Okay. I kind of was just hoping there'd just be a list. I'm sure they do quarrel about it. I have no doubt about it. A list of claimed relics. Okay, so here we go. The sand. All right, so I'm gonna let's see. The Girdle of Mary is supposed to be in the Netherlands. St. Peter's relics are either in the Vatican or they are in the wall, or they're in Rome. St. James in the Cathedral of Santiago in Spain. So the body is in an abbey in Padua. The head is in Prague, and the rib is in Thebes in Greece. So there we have a few spread out there. Poor St. George, his arm is in Lod. We got the shin is in Spain. Shin of the Pope, St. Clement was it the first? That's why angels have so many wings. Yep. Rylan says the holier you get, the more limbs you grow. That would be an interesting thing if that was something that happened. The 8-armed Prince of the Heavens. Yeah. I think I might keep that open. Or I like this a lot as a reference. So I'm going to need parts. Will this paste? There we go. Just have a little. There we go. So we can, some of them just say relics, but we got what? Arms and shin bones and skulls and some other stuff. I'll just have that over. The nice thing with these boards, not to start up, but they're sort of endless. They're the infinite, and you can just keep zooming out, zooming in. So it's really cool. You can just paste stuff in and just throw it somewhere on your board, and then you can move it off screen if it's getting in your way, but then it's there if you need it. Rylan says, makes me wonder who goes, hey, this holy guy just died. Let's chop up their body. Yeah. A hand for every kingdom, pretty much. So in this case, this was one kingdom. And I could see them if there was one particularly holy person that they would split up. I mean, this is a very small area, certainly much smaller than some of the different places that saints' bones are buried in, say, Europe. So I feel like that's reasonable to me. And hey, it's my world. They could do what they want. They want to chop this guy up into bits, spread it around all their gardens. Then so be it. I'm going to need to come up with rulers for all these petty kingdoms too. Who's ruling what? I'll have to do that at some point. Let's see. So far, no word from the fam. Wait a minute. Let me check my text messages just to be sure. All right. Nobody's calling me. So good. I'm good to keep going. But like I said, apologies if I have to jump off with speed at some point. It's just because the family is looking for me. I got the car, so I'm responsible. I'm the captain now. Well, it says maybe it's the king that died, spread their bones across the whole kingdom as part of their will. It's another idea. But then when I think about it, if it was the king, what made him holy? Because I feel like these bones have a real effect. It's not just somebody spreading them out to mark the whole kingdom as theirs, but they have power. So if it's the king, he had to have done something holy. He had to be a holy person, which it could be. It could certainly be both. The king could be a holy person, but we just have to figure out what we just have to figure out what he did that's holy. HOLY, not WHOLEY. He was not wholly irresponsible. He was holy as in had some kind of spark of divinity, mark of divinity. Maybe he unified the kingdoms through religion. That's possible. Possible. I'll make a. I don't think I was trying to put you over there. No, no, I don't want to be there. No, I don't want you to be part of that. I'm going to detach you. There you go. I'll make. There we go. Oh, I hate when it. No, not you. You. All right. All right. So I'm just call him the old king. So, who was the old king? Are the relics bits of the old king? Question mark. Can I zoom in here? What did the old king do to give his relics power? Had to be something good. I feel like when you're these uniting things in religion, I suppose it's good if you're that religion, but it's also something that tends to be just horrifically violent and bloody. I don't know if that would do it. I think maybe I want like real holiness and not like political victory, which is not to say it couldn't still be the old king, but I don't know if I want it to be just that he did something political, like bring everybody under the religion. No, sorry, are you leaving us? Well, you're welcome either way. Thanks for hanging out if you are leaving. Okay, we'll put him. Where should we put him? I need like a history section. So we got the old king. So we have some questions about the necromancer. I'm gonna have to make up some names for people. Let's see. So, does the necromancer work for any of the petty rulers of the valley? I'll ask this question. If so, are there motivations fully in alignment with their co-conspirator? I mean, there's also the question of what if the necromancer is maybe one of the rulers themselves? Is the necromancer one of the rulers or part of one of their families? Questions. We have questions. Questions that need answering. Indeed. Oh, let me just make a note here. I don't think unaware of the relic, but may know some of the story. I'm going to say that maybe he's unaware of what the relic was or what was there, but he might be aware of that. They said, kind of start getting them on the, that if they question him, which I imagine they will, that he will be aware of at least the beginnings of the test, some small amount. They're like, well, they always heard that they had founded these churches with something, but it was never explained what it was. Might be interesting to ask the question. Think about how did they discover the relic story / truth? I always like to think about that. If I remember it, how does this guy, how does your bad guy figure out the grand plan? Like, it's one thing I'm gonna say is a pet peeve of mine as a player. When you go through all this groundwork or this, legwork to discover something, like you do all this stuff to discover where the tomb of Khan the Impenetrable is, and then the bad guys just show up, and you're like, we went through all this hoops to find out where this thing is, and you guys just showed up here. Like, it always feels a little bit cheap when that happens. At least I think it feels cheap. Like, it's either, okay, were you guys following us, but we didn't have a chance to spot you, kind of thing. You're always going to be one step behind us, or you guys just happen to know, even though we did everything. Like, we burned everything, every piece of evidence behind us. There was no way for anyone to follow our trail, and yet you happen to find it. Like, I always get a little bit annoyed. So I kind of like to think about, well, if this guy figured out about it, well, how did he figure it out? Now, in our case, I don't have to worry about them because they're that pet peeve of mine, because this individual is ahead of the party. The party needs to try to catch up to what this person already knows. So I don't have to worry about it, but it's going to be good if I can think about that, because then that can make me think about where the party might discover that. What clues can the party follow to get the information to what the bad guy already discovered? Ryland, that's pretty much was my original thought. That's why I was saying you might have missed it, but yes, you're right on the ball with my thinking that removing the bones desanctifies these areas, which makes it easier for the necromancer, makes it possible to then use the corpses for undead and do all kinds of other nasty stuff, because the sanctifying effect is gone. So you and I are thinking on the same wavelength on that. And then I was just thinking, additionally, not only does it remove the sanctifying effect, but that he can try to, if he's got enough of the body, or maybe he has to have the whole body, try to animate this and create some kind of abomination, unholy abomination, by animating this empowered holy corpse. So you got it. You got it. You got it. It's a cool plan. I like it. Instead of the rod of 7 parts, it's the body of 14 parts. The body of 14 parts. And we can have fun figuring out what the body parts are in each place. Torso, arm, a shin bone. Hey, the K5K. Yeah, yeah. Unholy abominations. We got it. We got it in spades over here. Let's see. So we've been listing out kind of questions. So right now we have an I'm calling him the Necromancer, but that's probably will change, and it's not their permanent name, but it describes who they are. Is stealing relics from these churches, the relics being some holy person from the past that keeps these areas sanctified. Removing them then removes the sanctification. And then I think there's this ulterior plot of both removing the sanctification so that he can more easily get bodies for undead creation, but then also at the end of it all, he's going to try to reanimate the assembled pieces of this holy character to create the unholy abomination. And we have some questions about that. One, the relics, the story of the relics is not really well known. So how did they find it? Maybe if they're like the third son of, because I was thinking, are they a member of one of these petty royal families? Because there are, you can't see it here, but these are actually 7 petty kingdoms inside this valley. Used to be 1, now there's 7. And it could be that they're the kid of one of them. Maybe one of them who was in the, were they a member of the local religion here is the Order of the Blue Flame? Or was it White Flame? Order of the White Flame? I think it's White Flame. Any case. Yeah, White Flame, not blue. Were they a member of the order, or I should say maybe a high-ranking member? Where are they? / are they a high-ranking member of the order? Because if they were, that would be one way, that one avenue through which they would have gained some of this information. Because they need to know. They need to in order for them to formulate this plan of doing this, they had to kind of know that these ingredients existed. Ryland says maybe are the same bloodline as the saint and thus know about them, or require someone of the same bloodline to reanimate the saint. Oh, interesting. That's a good idea. I'll throw that in here in questions. Are they part of the holy bloodline, or do they need a member of that theta, that bloodline, to complete the final ritual? Good questions. Oops, there we go. Move that down there. I can move that there, maybe. Yeah, these are all good questions. And you know, the nice thing is I don't have to try to answer all of these now, but it's good to get them thinking. I get them percolating in the brain. And then when the party does something or something comes up, all of a sudden I go, oh, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense now. Or no, it doesn't. I imagine next session, they're going to do some combination of questioning, you know, checking over the crime scene, if you will. Seeing that, oh, okay, I mean, they've seen that there was this gap in the floor that was exposed and presumably something taken. There was something buried there and now it's not there anymore, that kind of thing. I imagine they're going to talk to Brother Wambareth, who's not going to know what was there, but maybe will think about like, oh, it was always said that there was something holy buried in these buried in these churches, something like the sanctify the grounds kind of thing. and that'll start hopefully getting them thinking. I imagine then they're going to go back to town, probably going to try to wine and dine the order for more information. But then are going to have the classic, like, okay, so somebody stole something, but this other things about like undead in the graveyard, there's no evidence for it. So it might sound a little suspicious. And the Brother Wemberth can't really back them up on that score because he didn't see any of it. He was asleep. They came in and rousted him. And that was about it. So it's not going to be an easy sell. And for these players, I've been trying by hook and by crook to kind of get them out of the habit of always trying to look for some authority figure to kind of guide them, because they love to do that. Especially one of them loves to go to the nearest authority figure and say like, "Oh, can we tell you?" And then, "When will you help us?" And I really am trying to get them into like, "No, do this yourselves." So usually I play the authority figures. It's very much like, you want to do this, you do it. I think I thought in the last game I was getting to them a bit, but they started out this session or this game kind of doing the same thing of like, let's find the nearest authority figure and let's try to like get all the information we can out of them and kind of put ourselves in their service, kind of thing. And it's like, that's fine, but these people want you to do. I want them to do and then come back and say, "Hey, we did this thing." Like, come up with an offer or something, and like get yourself some leverage and then come back. Don't just go and kind of try to kind of be a wheedler and be like, "Oh, I'm here." And like I feel like they're acting a little bit, if you watch Succession, like oh, what's his name? Not Greg, but oh shoot, what's his name now? Shiv's husband, if you watch Succession. I don't know why I'm spacing out on his name, but he's always trying to wheedle in and be like, "Yeah, I think that if you've," no, not really any real spoilers, but continually going to people saying, "I'm at your service. I'm here if you need me." And I feel like they're kind of doing that thing. And it's like, I want them to be more like, "No, make your own way and then come back and then make a deal." Ryland, I hear that, but I don't like it. I just feel like it's the thing that I see like everybody does. Like, "Oh, they're secretly working for the bad guy." I don't want to do that to them. I don't love that trope. I feel like it's overexposed. If I didn't see it like 100, I mean, it's not even necessarily overexposed to me personally. I feel like maybe it's because I read Reddit and read all these GMs posting their ideas. I feel like it's all the time. And that's another one of those things that I dislike to a degree, just personally, because it's one of those setups that I feel like the GM, when you have a setup like that, I feel like often the GM has shades things so that the players don't really have a good chance to figure out what's going on. Right? Like, "Oh, I've been talking to this guy for every session, for literally years of game time, but I never got any kind of intuition or any sense at any point. They could have been lying to me through their teeth. But if I were to say something to them, I'd have to roll something. But this guy's just been lying to me from the jump. And I didn't I don't want to." It's one of those things that when it's done well, it can be really good, but I feel like it's often done poorly. I don't necessarily trust myself to be like the one to do it well. And I maybe even worse, because I don't love it as a thing. Because maybe I've just been burned by it or just seen it kind of go awry. I love giving guys a lot of gray. So there's going to be people in the order in the thing who might not be as helpful as they think, or maybe want to play their own angles, or they're going to have their own games running. Like, there's going to be a lot of gray area guys. But I don't know if I'm going to have the guy that they're kind of like, "We're reporting to you," and then they're secretly the bad guy. I mean, who knows? I mean, this is all just now. Things may change. They may do things. They may get themselves in the mix of, things they may, who knows, twists and turns. Like I said, everything I write down in here, it's all considered in pencil until it actually gets spit out of my mouth on game day, and then it becomes pen. So everything is subject to change until it becomes kind of locked in. So I won't say never, like it's impossible, but I don't think that's where I'm going to go with it at first flush. Plus, I don't really give them access to like top guy. I mean, this person doesn't have to be a top person at this point. It really depends. When we start to answer some of these questions, that will flesh it out, right? If there's someone who is of the Holy Order, or if there's someone who's high up in the order, then the players are not going to be on their same level, so they're not going to be in the same sphere, so they're not going to be communicating with each other. Same thing if this person happens to be a member of one of the royal families, or one of the many kind of branches of the royal family tree, then they're probably also not going to be in contact with the players. But if we come up with some other reason, some other angle, then maybe we could tie them in and say, "Oh, maybe this was somebody who the players interacted with." But I probably wouldn't make it like, "Here's your boss," sort of thing. Not to say it can't work, but it's another one of those things like do it with care. Because if it doesn't work, it can feel like, and especially if you're doing something like, I think it's worse in kind of the sort of 5th edition or any kind of game that has your sort of lie telling skill check. Because then it really feels like from the players, if you've been running this game on them for a while and you're like, well, players, I think rightfully you could say like, why did I never get an intuition check? Or why did I never get a detect lies kind of thing? Like, why was I never given a chance to discover this? And I know GMs will say, oh, you had chances, but it's like, no, you probably didn't, because the whole thing is predicated on that turn. The it was me all along. And that doesn't, and so you tend to want to preserve it. So you tend not to want to give all those checks, because regardless of how strong a liar this person is, all it takes is one crit miss or one crit, depending on how you run it by a player. Like if you're running a check, you could run a crit fail and that the player snags it, or depending on how you run crits, they roll a 20 and then they get it. Like it's pretty easy to get into it, where you still there, even if they're super good and the players are super bad, over time, chances are the players would figure something out. And so when you don't tell them, tend to think that you were holding out on them. Oh, let's see. Anything else I'm thinking about right now? If you guys have anything else you want to talk about, I'm happy to. It's what was it, 10:30? No one's pinging my phone. I might call it quits at 11 just because don't want to get too far with it, but I'm happy to talk about other stuff. I'm not sure what else I have to cover right now. I got a lot of good questions. I feel like I need to ruminate on them. See what's going to happen. I guess, I mean, we don't know the Necromancer's next steps. I don't know where the Necromancer's going after this. I imagine they're moving around. They're going to be going towards, and I had labeled these towns and now I have to remember. So Late Tree is this one. I want to say this one, Summerhill, is here because I had thought about that one. I'll mark it. But I lost my labels when my Worldographer crashed, or I didn't save it. I don't know what I did. So I lost some my stuff. And then I know that Old Gate is 2313. And then I gotta figure out, I gotta remember what these what the remaining are. No, Soren says, yeah, I tend to have the NPCs roll to lie to the characters. If they fail, I do tell the player something might be amiss, but I don't use crit fumbles on skill checks, only for attacks. Oh, he's back. Yeah, I know. I that's why I kind of preface. I know some folks run them, some folks. I know by the book in 5th edition, you're not supposed to use crits for skill checks, but a lot of people run them anyway. And that's one of those things that, if you're running crits on those skill checks, you're giving your players 5% always on chance to succeed, and that can bite your very capable bad guy at the worst possible time if they're in that situation. I mean, if you're gonna roll with it, that's cool. Like I would agree with that. Yeah, their boss is the bad guy all along, and session 8 something slips, someone rolls that crit, and it's like, oh, they realize something's amiss with their boss. That's awesome. But oftentimes, like I said, it's one of those things that you as a GM, you can get too tied to the big reveal, big twist, big moment. And so you start to subtly, maybe not unintentionally, you start to shade things to make sure you get to your moment. And then it can feel like, as a player, you can feel like you got bamboozled a little bit. I mean, when it's really bad, I mean, I've said this story before, but I'll say it again because it's been a while. And it's just stuck with me since college. Okay, this will tell you some of these things, how they can really imprint on people. This has stuck with me since college. I had made what I thought was a cool concept for a 2nd edition game. And the GM was really cool. It's like, I wanted to try something different. And he was like, yeah, let's work on it. So this character of mine was essentially a living weapon, like a sentient weapon that had been created by the gods in some kind of conflict in the eons in the murky past, but essentially had been left on the battlefield, right? I don't know, battery wound down, buried, left there. And then as the eons passed, was uncovered, regained consciousness once again, was kind of back in the world, a world they didn't know because they'd been gone out of the mix for millennia, when the world was totally different. And of course, gotten in with the party, and he had some cool stuff. He had some natural armor, he had natural weapons, but when we're talking about balancing it, like I couldn't wear any magical armor. Like I could wear rings. Like my armor, my natural armor would increase as I leveled up, but I couldn't get magic armor, so I just had to do with what I had. And I think I couldn't use weapons, and I had to kind of use my natural weapons. And I had this thing where a part of what gave me energy, how I healed, was like I ate what I killed. So like I'd be on the like kind of like a battlefield thing. Like, oh, like what better kind of instrument than it kills on the battlefield, and then it kind of removes the dead as it's going along. So that was the thing. I had to, like, at the end of the fight, I had to eat what I killed. But I couldn't use missile weapons, I think, was also the thing. But this is a really cool character concept. And we but the GM started us down, and I remember we had some like minor adventure kind of going along, and then suddenly, I don't know why, because things happened and I ended up leaving the school and leaving the game, and it was kind of gone. So I never really got to find out what happened. But we had like a little adventure and everything was going fine. But then suddenly he warped us to a whole new world, totally new world. It just dropped us. I mean, it was like literally falling out of the sky, like in was it an Army of Darkness, right? Just landing in a pile, and suddenly these like scorpion creatures are coming out, like we're like beset by these scorpion creatures. Really tough fight. Okay. But what happens is the fight is winding down, and me and one other guy we're still up. Like everyone else has been knocked out, and we're still kind of grinding, and like he was rolling poorly. Like I remember we were like rolling some crit. Like we were just having it. Like it was an awesome fight. I mean, this was like, if you end it now with what's happening, because we're beset by these scorpion creatures, and then we can see in the background that this cavalry, there's a castle in the background, and we can see that there's some cavalry are sortying out of the castle, and like we just we could just feel like we just got to hold on. Like we can just get like a couple more rounds where we just don't get down. Like we're golden. Like this is going to be awesome. And if that had happened, I would be remembering this moment as a super awesome moment. Like maybe the highlight of my like gaming, in terms of just this awesome, like pulling victory out of the jaws of defeat. And it seemed like we had done it. At some point he says, the last couple of these scorpion creatures, they're chased off, they're rushing off, and this cavalry's coming, and we're like, oh yeah, me and this other guy are like, yeah, we did it, like we did it. And then what happens is he narrated how some of those scorpion guys who have been running away a minute ago turned around, came back, knocked us out, and then ran away again, so that we could all wake up in the cells and the bowels of the castle. So basically we could be kind of lorded on by this, whatever, I don't even remember the name of this, whatever the people there could look at us, and, we'd be at their mercy essentially. And it was the most deflating thing. It went from being like, this could have been my top moment, to it's the thing I always remember with just a bitter taste in my mouth. Because clearly the GM had this plan of, all right, they're going to land down here. They're going to get beaten up by scorpions. These guys are going to rescue them. And they're going to be kind of like, oh, we've rescued you, and now you're kind of at our mercy. So we're going to send you on a quest to do whatever. I could see it. Like he had this thing planned out. It wasn't working out that way. Now he could have gone with what we had done, which was really cool. And then he would have had to change things a little bit. But the thing is, in retrospect, I'm like, it wouldn't have changed that much. We still were wounded. We still needed help. We still were in a land that we didn't make, far, far away, knowing nobody, knowing nothing. We could have still been kind of in their debt, so to speak, or at least at their mercy, kind of, right? It wouldn't have been that different, but he could have let us have this moment. And I don't think he wasn't a bad GM. I mean, he wasn't a bad GM at all, but he couldn't let go of this plan, which necessitated us waking up in some cells in the dungeon. Now, the other thing could have done is we fall out of the sky, we just knock ourselves out, end up in the dungeon. Like that could have been it too. Like there were ways, multiple ways which you could have done this, but he took, to me, this other path, right? And this is the thing that I guess when I always think about people feel like did he, and the thing is I never got to talk because of just how things went out with that. Like I never really got to talk to other people. Like it just like all ended and then I was gone. Like everything's happened. Like I never got to have like a post-mortem with everybody. It's just bad. Just bad, right? And so now I remember it 30 years later for being this horrible, horrible experience. So don't do that. And don't think that people won't remember. Don't think that people won't see it. I don't know if there are other people in the group who would, I don't know if this person's mind was like, oh, they're never going to know. But it was like the thing where like, I remember like throwing my pencil down and going like, man, this is BS. Like what the F, right? It was bad and you can't really take it back. That's the other thing. You can't really undo it. I mean, you can say, oh, I didn't realize you could retcon it, but you can't get that moment back, right? You can retcon it and say, okay, I realize everybody, this was a mistake and I shouldn't have done it. And so let's rewind and kind of play it out the other, but it's over. It's gone, right? Like I'm like that as Rylan said, that buzzkill that buzz cannot get unkilled. You can tell me now that like, oh, okay, we've changed our mind or blah, 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 but I'm not going to get that feeling back. That feeling of elation that I had, that feeling of like overcoming a great odds of doing something really noteworthy and amazing, not coming back. I was just like, okay, well, you just, you can kind of say like, well, you unscrewed us, but it feels like you just screwed us and then asked for a mulligan, but I still feel kind of screwed. Like it just doesn't work. Right. So always just be mindful of that because it's powerful. You can end up with these powerful moments, and those powerful moments you can end up with negative, powerful moments. That was definitely a very negative, powerful moments. Right. The K5K says you got to have the writers come in and aid you, and you're heroic. Yeah, they were impressed by what we did, and like, oh my gosh, but like the king could still like, or queen or whoever could still be like, oh, I don't trust you yet, or who are you strangers, and you have to prove yourselves. And some people are like, but sir, they saved, they look what they did, whatever. Yeah, I mean, many ways to do it, right? But what happens is, I think this happens to all of us, and I mentioned this earlier, you get caught in the moment. Like he was caught in the moment, probably looking at his notes, going, this is where they're supposed to end up, in this cell, like this thing, but they're not there. How do I get them to the cell? Right? If he would have called a smoke break, or at the time where I didn't smoke, but we had smoke breaks. But if he called a break, so I need a timeout, give me 5 minutes, let me sort this out. Probably this all would occur to him. Like I'm not suggesting he couldn't have thought of all this stuff, and he probably thought of it all. It's probably just too late, right? But your campaigns, your players' feelings can turn, and it's hard to get that back. So whenever you're thinking of your plans, whenever you're thinking about these moments, whenever you're thinking about whatever, keep that in mind, because it's really hard to win back that trust, to get back if you squander it. And ultimately, when you think about the differences between what these moments could have ended up with, it's so small in the grand scheme of things. So small. And going back to that, what I was saying before about when I made the short about me not liking, like me as a player, not necessarily want to be a co-creator, but me as a player liking to just muck about and stuff. This is kind of part of that, right? Because I mucked up with the plans and he undid the muckery, or me and another guy, right? We mucked up the plans and it didn't stand. He didn't let it stand. He had to find a way to undo it. And that was, that was the killer. Whereas I want to be in a game, ideally, where any mucking about I do is honored. We've mucked with it. The world has changed. And now that muck stands. And then the world is altered because of it. And that, I think, is, for me as a player, that is part of the engaging. Because I love to do things like that. And I want to know that if I do something, and it could be good, could be bad, it's going to stand. And it's not going to be undone because it's inconvenient. It's not going to be ignored because it doesn't match up with some grand plan somewhere. I want to know that, like, it's going to, it's going to stand, that we can interact with the world and the world will stay acted upon. Right. Could be a video, honestly. I've mentioned that Ryland, I've mentioned the story a bunch. I used to call it more often because it's always the first story I go to of here's my personal experience of a really bad DM moment. Maybe I'll make a standalone video about it because I think I've talked about it on streams, so different people watch and a lot of folks. It doesn't get out there. Yeah, maybe I'll have a good point about it. It's true. I don't know. I don't want to bore people with the same thing over and over because honestly, I don't have a lot of those moments. I mostly have really good moments, but that one is always the one that I recall, and unfortunately, it's one that was bad. Like of all the playing I did in that game, and I mean, it wasn't in it that long, but for a little while, like I had that one moment where I did something kind of good and I felt good about it, and I had this other one where it was just awful. But the one that always springs to mind first is the awful one. No, nothing says the cool thing that happens by chance is the pinnacle of RPGs. The cool thing the DM writes is not near as interesting. Yes, and I think the problem is that we think things are cool that aren't, or they're cool to us, and then in the light of day, when other people, it's like that joke you think is super funny, and you tell it, and you get nothing but crickets. And it's the same thing with stuff we think is cool. Yeah, we thought it was cool, not that cool. But when everyone else is going, oh man, this is cool, you should probably try to figure out how you can ride that. Like, how can that be the thing? And forget whatever plan I had written down that hadn't happened anyway. That's why I think if everything's in pencil. If everything's in pencil and it's not locked in yet, then I can ride whatever fun thing has come up because the world can always go different ways. So I'm not, I'm not being deceitful or anything. If they have a cool idea and I run with that cool idea, it's like nothing had been set yet. So that idea is just as real and just as possible to happen as whatever idea I had. But if you're already set in your ways and that same thing comes up, you're liable to want to override it because it's like, no, my thing's really cool. And then it turns out, yeah, your thing wasn't really that cool. And I don't mean any offense. That applies to me too. I'm not trying to say that I somehow have cooler ideas than everyone else. It's like, we're not Shakespeare. We're not Homer. We're not Hemingway. We're not, we're not F. Scott Fitzgerald. We're not insert awesome writer here. Our plots, our stories, they're not that great. And when I hear it, and I almost feel like it would be a good task to like read it, like write out your story like you're going to post on Reddit, put it in a drawer for a couple days, and just think about other things and come back and read it. And I bet you'll find probably doesn't sound as cool as you thought it did. I mean, I know for me when I'm reading stuff on Reddit, and I know these GMs think this stuff's awesome, and I know I don't comment on them because I'm not here to bring down people, but I'm like, that's not that cool. Or it's the same thing I've seen in like 50 threads this week with the half god who needs to rediscover their divinity. It's like I've seen it a million times. It ain't that great. Trust me. No, Sorian says it's like stealing the spotlight from the game in a way. Yeah, it is. It really is. It's showing the seams. It's showing like, oh no, this was really a cutscene you're going to. Really, really is. Oh, let's see. How are we doing here? All right, I think I will. So I think I'm going to close up shop at 11. So we got 11. We got 11 minutes till 11. What do we want to talk about? I feel like I'm kind of done. I mean, if you guys have comments on things, if you've been here for the breakdown of what's going on here, I'm happy to talk about it. But if you guys want to talk about something else in the next 10 minutes or so, happy to go that way also. What you got? I'm at your disposal. So someone sent me a Reddit. Oh, Null Terminated sent me a note on Reddit. All right, I'll read that after I'm done. What's going on with everybody? How's everybody's Saturday doing, by the way? I could have been somewhere. I could have been partying like it's 1999. I chose to be here with you. Actually, I just kind of wanted to hang out. Ugh. Sometimes I find with a lot of my that's one thing I miss. So I was born in New York. I moved to different places. It was gone for a long time. Came back. One of the places I was in Houston for a long time, and I had a really good friend kind of network in Houston, and we could sit around and we'd go on Saturdays in the afternoons and sit around talking game stuff and other things for hours, usually about my friend's game and stuff, what's going on. I don't really have that here, but streaming does kind of fill that gap in a bit, being able to talk game stuff. Where I would have been if I wasn't here, I would not have been talking any kind of game stuff. I'm not sure what I would have been talking about, but I feel like I was thinking like I was kind of calculating in my head, like I go there, it's gonna be. I was thinking like I'm probably gonna be a little bit bored, and I don't want to be bored. I don't want to be where I'm on my phone too much, or I'm just kind of zoning out. And I was like, can I stay home? Is this something where I could stay home? And it was like, yeah, I could stay home. So I'm home. And then I thought, well, I'm home. I'm by myself. I can do this. And this is cool. Let's see. Oh, going on walks while listening. Cool. It's late here, and it was just some hellacious raining. It seemed like going on, but it seems like it's past. It's one of those spring thunderstorms just sweeping through. Norsorian said, oh, wait, did I miss something from the K5K? Hold on, let me scroll up. Oh. K5K said, never snatch your player's victory from the grasp. It's just mean. A DM has countless minions. The players have won the battle, but have they won the war? Improv. Yeah. I mean, I do feel like if there was something that they had, if it was something we had missed, I would not have no problem with the GM activating it, right? Imagine we were fighting around a bomb that we were, or let's say a landmine that we were supposed to disarm as part of this encounter, and we forgot to do it. And then we win, and then it blew up. Like, I'd have no problem with that. Like, that would, to me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, how could we goof that up? Right? Like, to me, it comes down to, was this something that was out there that was our thing? But this was outsider. And the thing is, when it wasn't even that like these creatures came back and went back in initiative. I mean, when I say that these creatures ran back to us, knocked us out and left, that's kind of how it happened. It was like a cutscene. We had no initiative, no defense, no control, like nothing. It was just like, oh, these guys come back, knock you on the head, you're knocked out, and go. Right. That was literally, at least how I remember it. And my memory may be faulty, but my recollection of it is like we didn't even get a fighting chance on that comeback. It was just he just took it away. So it really comes to I feel like I want the players to feel like they earned it, and we definitely felt like we earned it, right? But I was not like if there had been something there. So if it had been, like, to go back to my landmine example, if there had been a landmine and we failed to detonate it, and then the GM was like, well, technically this should happen, but I gave it to you because it was cool. I wouldn't have loved that either, because I wanted to feel like that we owned it, and we owned all the bits of it. Like, yeah, we detonated, or we rigged it to explode when they ran over it, or like whatever, right? I just want to own the moment by whether it's good or bad. I want to own the moment. And he took ownership of the moment away. But I hear what you're saying. But I'm not of the school of like, oh, it's cool. Like, yeah, it's cool. It's also, it would have been kind of immensely kind of tragic in sort of a fun, memorable way if we'd forgotten to do something basic and got ourselves blown up for it. That probably would have stuck in my mind as a hilarious moment of, oh my gosh, what happened this campaign? We did all this stuff. We took victory from the jaws of defeat, and then gave it right back as the bomb that we'd been meaning to disarm and forgotten about in the heat of battle suddenly blew up on us. Like, that would have been memorable. I would not have had a problem with that. I would have just been like kicking myself. It's like we almost had it. Like, we almost had it, and then we didn't. But that would be, because we still had ownership of the moment. But when the GM takes ownership of the moment away, then, and I think this is where also you get into like the whole fudging dice and not fudging dice, like this all like who owns the moment, and how heavy are you trying to press your hand on the scale one way or another? And then once you start to do that, then you do kind of take on responsibilities. And once you decide you have those responsibilities, then I think some more of these issues come up where you end up having to do that. But my preference is like no hands on the scales. Let the things fall where they may. Just keep it fair in the sense of you're not pushing one way or another. But in our case, the GM was like, no, I'm putting all my weight on this one side of the scale because I need this thing to happen. And so it all went poor. Ryland, sushi at the mall sushi. Nice. Oh, you're in Pacific time. Okay. So was it 3 hours? You're 3 hours back of me. Is it 3 or 4 hours? 3 hours back. All right. So you're just entering prime time. K5K says RPing lies versus a roll to determine it is a fundamental difference in game approach. I like the RP way, as there can never be certainty of a lie in their opinion. Yeah, I don't mind the not having it. I mean, my players have asked like, "Hey, do I have a?" I think one of them asked like once, like, "Do I have some kind of role to detect if they're lying?" And I'm like, "Nope, you have you. You have your intuition, and whether it seems like this person's saying something that you think is true or not." And I'll try to hint out if somebody's being, if it seems obvious, someone's being like shifty. But sometimes you can be shifty because you're nervous or shifty for other reasons. So it's usually a gray area, right? Um, it can require work, I think, when you want it. It can be hard if you're playing in these kind of social situations. Again, though, it's all about being kind of like that fairness thing. And you know, if it's, especially if it's like a major plot point, like this is the game revolves around the fact that you secretly work for the bad guy, then there's a lot of pressure on those social moments where the party's interfacing with the bad guy. And just know that at the end of it, at least me, I can't, you know, I'll just say for myself, you know, I don't want to, as a player, I want to feel like I'm trying to be clever. I'm trying to be as clever as I can. And I'm trying to be play as smart as I can. Okay. So this is me, right? This is Todd. When I play the game, I'm trying to be as smart as I can, as clever as I can. I want to try to get my guy through the game, survive, do the mission objectives, do everything I can. So for me, at the end of the day, when the GM goes, haha, it was me, it was your old boss all along, I'm going to start going through all the moments. I'm going to start thinking about like, was there anything here? If there wasn't anything there, I'm going to feel like, well, this was some baloney. Because I've been having dinner with this guy in game. We've been going to the same, and like he's been hiding this all from me. And there was like, I'm going to start thinking through all the moments where there could have been some kind of hint, you know, some kind of information there to give me, you know, a clue, something's going on. And if there are none, I'm going to feel a little bit like, well, that's some BS. Because if there are no, especially if there are no roles, you're really relying on cues in the conversation in the RP to tell you that something's going on. And especially if they're not telling you anything, because the dialogue is like, we need you to go to this town and find this thing. It's like, okay, boss, that's our mission. We'll go do it. There's no reason for me to, especially if it's like the game premise is that we work for this guy. You know, it's like you work for the CIA and the CIA director is secretly an agent of Hydra. It's like, okay, but I'm not, it's the premise of the game. I'm not going to argue the premise, right? If you tell me I work for the CIA and this guy's a CIA director, I'm not going to start looking at them to see if they're lying, because that's the whole premise of the game is I work for the CIA. So then as a GM is you have to take some extra steps to put some data out there if that's going to be your thing, right? Because I think that's important. Because I've had that where someone will say like, you know, like I had a game, I was another play-by-post game. And I think I might have mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. So we're playing in this game, and the premise is that we're all in the Assyrian Empire, and we're all going to the capital, Nineveh, to petition the King of Kings for something or other. And my character was an astronomer, and I think I was petitioning the King of Kings for a new telescope, something, or, you know, something, or like a ziggurat where I could go and look at the stars, some kind of astral something or other, probably not a telescope, whatever it was, something where I could go and do some better astronomy. So we get to Nineveh and we're in the throne room, and we get in there, and the King of Kings, some assassins attack the King of Kings. You know, we'd made our presentations, or some of us had, and this assassination attempt takes place. And we're like, oh my gosh, and we end up muddling around. We end up killing the assassins. Of course, that's weird thing number one. Like, he's got guards, he's got other people. Somehow, it's me, an astronomer. It's like another guy. Like, we're like these peasants from the country. We're like, and we're the ones that fight them off. Like, okay. Then it turns out, so we're still there in the aftermath of the assassination attempt. And we, like, word comes that like there's forces at the wall, like where the Nineveh's under siege. And, you know, I'm thinking about like, and I'm not saying this in the game, or we're playing by post, so I'm not typing this up, but I'm thinking, you know what? Like, did we get here? Can we not tell there's a siege? I mean, you're surrounding a major city. Like, it doesn't happen. I mean, we're playing okay, it's a fantasy game. So maybe it did happen overnight. Maybe we walked in through the gates and walked through the countryside, and there was no evidence that there was some big army rolling behind us with siege, they're ready to lock the town in a siege. But all right, fine. We'll just take it as written, even though I'm starting to tweak my, I don't know why we didn't delay if there's big armies on the move, but hey, okay, fine. We're here. So then the King of Kings says, will you fight for us? And we're like, I guess. Okay, sure. So we're given some equipment and we're sent off to the walls, and we end up kind of fighting off an attack. And I think I spent the whole thing just using the aid. The whole combat was just using the aid action because I'm an astronomer. I have no real combat abilities at all. So I'm just like, okay, aid, aid. That's my, I just did the whole thing. Oh, I'm going to aid this guy, aid them. I'm going to aid. And I was trying to come up with different ways to aid this other person. And we do end up winning. And then I think whatever. And then the guy sent me a message after, it's so what'd you guys think? And I said I'm just going to be honest, that it's this wasn't the game that I was really signing up for. This wasn't really what I wanted to do. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, we had this, we had this cool kind of character creation where we were supposed to set up this thing. And then he had us write up why we're coming to town. And I'm like, this is really neat. And yeah, I'm digging this. Okay, I'm going to be this astronomer and I need this, I need this, whatever. I don't telescope, whatever I was going to do. I need a new ziggurat. Great. And I was expecting hey, to earn this, do something. And okay, I'm expecting an adventure thing, but I wasn't expected to be thrown into essentially these combats right away. And no choice. I didn't have a choice. I didn't feel like I had a choice. I didn't feel like I had a choice, obviously, when the assassination stuff happened. And I didn't feel like I had a choice when the King of Kings says, you're going to go to the walls and fight. Granted, we're 3 or 4 guys and you have who knows how many soldiers. How much difference are we supposed to make? What are you supposed to do? We're not trained soldiers, but all right. And the GM said, but you could have said no. And I said to him, with all due respect, if I'm playing in character, how does one say no to the King of Kings? There are reliefs all over the place of what they do to their enemies. And I know full well, a peasant doesn't go to the King of Kings and the King of Kings says, hey, you going to do this for me? And then say nah, I don't think so. Now, and the story is to illustrate how you may think you're giving players a choice, or you may be giving them a situation that they have some input on. But the reality is that to the players, it doesn't feel like a choice at all. The GM thought that he was giving us a choice. The King of Kings is asking us, hey, do you want to do this? And he was thinking in his mind, oh, well, they have the freedom to say no. But me, as I'm role-playing the moment, I'm like, he's a peasant. He's the king. The king tells you to do something or asks you, in quotes, air quotes, to do something. It's not really you do it, right? So I didn't feel like we had and the other thing is okay, in the moment, the king is being attacked. The city's under siege. Where are we going to go? What is the option B of that? No, we're not going to fight the walls. We're just going to try to sneak out of the city and during a whole siege warfare thing where we're 3 peasants. There wasn't really to me anyway, I couldn't see a reasonable other solution. Yes, if you want to be technical about it, sure, we could have said no, but then if the consequences of no are we get, hung up by our toenails, or what there wasn't a real other option. There was just one option, but the GM thought they had multiple options. So I just be careful about that, because you can think you're giving options. You can think you're giving something that seems like a wide open scenario, but then when you look at it, and it can be hard to look at it from the player's perspective or look at it from the role-playing perspective, like Deckard, when he's in the office of the police chief and he's like, man, I'm not doing this. And, the police chief doesn't say you have to, but he says you want to be police or you want to be little people? You know what happens to little people? And Deckard recognizes it's well, you're asking me to go, but I don't really have a choice, right? And that's what I felt like. You may be technically asking me, but I didn't feel like I have a choice. So if you really want to bake in choices, make sure you're really baking them in. Or try to just look at your situation from the outside. But you may not be giving your players as much choices as you think. And I don't even remember what I was really responding to, but that's always a good story. Yeah, it's something like Rylan says there. Good points about authority and figure choice. Yeah, who is tasking your players with things? What's the situation? What do they really feel like they can do? Because the players often will feel like they have to do something, and use the GM feel like, but they don't have to do that. And I'll tell you what, I will remind my players. That's never a bad idea to remind your players, like, hey, you don't have to do this. I told them that yesterday or Thursday during the game. I was like, look, if you guys don't feel ready to undead hunt, or you've thought about it, and you're like, I'm like, don't do it. Right? Don't do it for me. Don't go out there and go undead hunt for me. Do something else. I'll come up with other things to do. I will certainly come up with other stuff. I don't need to do something just to do it. Oh, look at that. Well, that story that I wandered around has taken us over the 11 o'clock hour. So I'm going to bail out. This was an awesome, 2.5 hours. Any last thoughts before I feel like my voice is going too, so it's probably good that I take a break. Any last thoughts? Anything before I close her up? Thanks for all the help. I feel like I got some good added some threads to the tapestry here. Ron says, take care and thanks for stream. Thanks, Ron. Thanks for hanging out. Always appreciate it. All right. Well, I guess that's it. If I see anything before I hang up, if you guys give a thumbs up on your way out, that'd be awesome. If you wandered in here and you thought this was fun and you're not subscribed to the channel, if you want to subscribe, that'd also be awesome. Otherwise, everybody have a great rest of your night or your day, wherever you happen to be. Game on, and I will talk to you later. Bye, everybody.